So the board is back in open session. Welcome everyone. This is our sort of last business meeting of the summer, first one of the sort of the start of the new school year. So it's exciting to see everyone here, and I hope everyone's eager for the start of the year. So the first item of business is public comment. So if anyone, I have a couple people on the list here. So first is Ms. Doctor. If you could step to the microphone, please, and state your name and address.
Hi, my name's Wendy Doctor, and I'm at 186 Akenside. I'm going to try and read this time so I don't start bad. As you all know, I completely support the decision to add a section to Central School's second and third grades. And as you can see from the turnout tonight and the emails that I think you've gotten, that there are many other parents that do as well. I appreciate your consideration for our concerns about our students' learning opportunities, and we look forward to your support tonight for these classrooms and for striving to adhere to the district's class enrollment or class size policy. I hope, too, that this can be a recommitment to this policy, since if we are committed to excellence as we should be, and I think we are, small class sizes is one of the many components to help us achieve this. On a related note, I'm also interested to hear about, and I saw in the agenda, about the proposal for the demographic study that's included in tonight's agenda. I don't have enough info to voice an opinion on it, but I'm happy to see that the district is thinking about this in advance of your decisions needed to be made on the expansion at our schools. Time is short, however, and decisions will need to be made very soon on next year, as additional classrooms at any of the schools may require more than shuffling classes and rooms as we are able to do at Central this year. Our district sees big jumps in first and second grade enrollments, and the current pre-K and first grade, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade classes district-wide look about the same as an increasing enrollment trajectory as the second and fourth grades in our district were back when they were there. And so, and as I have a three-year-old as well, I know the toddler crew around town, and I also think that we're going to see even a larger group come in. It's the twos and threes come barreling in. In closing, I really do want to say thank you. This experience has been wonderful, talking with you, Mr. Miller, with you, Martha, and with Mr. Gatz, and the emails that have been going through, and the couple board meetings that I've been to. It's evident that everyone here cares about all of our students and about our success and our district and our students' learning. And as I've told everyone that I've talked to, I just really see great hope for our future for our districts with you guys all here, and listening. And you are all open to listening to our views, and I appreciate that as well. So thank you for all your time. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doctor. Next up, we have Ms. Luskey. So likewise, if you could state your name and address.
Carrie Luskey, or Zaluski, however you prefer. It's not my name, doesn't matter. 437 Repton Road. I have 4 kids. I have a second grader, incoming kindergartner, and then 2 behind that. So I'm very interested in the class size issue. I'm basically going to echo everything Wendy said. I'm here to say thank you. You guys responded quickly and appropriately, and so I'm very appreciative. I think this is one of the most important issues of this district, and I know there are many parents who feel the same way. I know there's been emails going around. Budgets are tight, and I know that there's a lot of things that we want to spend money on, but I think hiring teachers and making our class sizes small is the best way we can spend money. I think not only I have 4 kids in the district, I think everyone benefits, because if we're able to offer the small class sizes, this area, Riverside, is a very competitive place. Our housing prices will always remain competitive, because people will choose Riverside over like a LaGrange or Hinsdale, because from what I'm hearing is people choose Riverside not just because of the beauty, but because of the small class sizes. So I would echo Wendy too, and I have small kids. I moved here 8 years ago, and there are now twice as many preschools here than when I first moved here, and they're all full. So that's telling us that this is an ongoing problem, and I don't envy your job at hand, but I appreciate and I hope you continue on this path. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Luskey. Are there any other comments? Any other people who would like to speak? If not, then we...
There is.
Oh, there is someone. Oh, yes.
My name's Carrie Abood, 21 North Herbert Road, Riverside. I emailed you all earlier in the week about my concern about the class size in the second grade at Central. I see the administration now recommending the 4th classroom, so I want to thank you very much for dealing with that. I just want to encourage you to be proactive about thinking of these class sizes going forward now. I also have 2 other younger kids coming up in this district. It's my understanding that Central now is really maximizing all of their space. I hope that we're not scrambling next year a week before class starts to hire another teacher, but that you think very proactively about the demographics and what's going on in our district going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Abood. Is there any other comments or any other? If not, then the next item on the agenda does any board member have any proposed changes to the agenda? If not, we move on to the Superintendents Report.
Sure, and thank you. So, right, as this looks like the first meeting of the new year as opposed to the last meeting of last year, I wanted to just take a minute and point out and thank some people about our Teacher Institute Day. So I think people always wonder what goes on in a school over the summer, and if you take a look at our Institute Day schedule that's attached and what our teachers are coming back to, just a lot of great planning done by our district leadership team. Meryl Brownlow's brought a ton of leadership to this. Our teachers gave a lot of feedback and input. Parents gave a lot of feedback and input in terms of what's needed and what's next. And so our Institute Day, I think, is a great representation of the work that we're going to do. It's the ongoing curriculum work and giving teachers time and opportunity to continue to refine the skills that they need, the time they need to plan carefully with a lot of new tools and resources in front of them. A lot of strong emphasis also on social emotional learning. We're bringing back Carrie Goldman, who did a parent night presentation on anti-bullying. She's going to do some work directly with our Hauser staff. We also have another really interesting and exciting group called Facing History and Ourselves. It's really going to look at kind of a social justice lens for our students. So again, there's a lot packed into 3 days of professional development for our teachers. It really represents the kickoff. It represents the work that's going to be ongoing over the course of the year. But just certainly a big kind of hats off to the team that did a lot of that planning and looked for input and looked for feedback, and I think has really kind of hit the mark in terms of delivering on what we need to do as we kick off a new and exciting school year. So thanks to Meryl, and I think Kim and Kesmira and Pete are all back there. Pam, yeah, Don, thank you. And also just to invite any board members who might be interested that on the Monday morning, the 21st, we introduce our new staff. We'll do a welcome and a kickoff, and if anybody's interested in joining us for any part of that first day in particular, I think maybe that first hour or two, if schedules permit, certainly let me know and feel free to join us. So. The other item I want to talk about is class size and enrollment. We are going to talk more about that under old business. We're going to actually look at some class size waivers. I appreciate the positive comments about opening the additional sections, and yet we know that class size continues to be a challenge. The comments I really want to share tonight is that the most important objective we have when we talk about class size is that we know that our students are learning and assuring that our students have wonderful opportunities to learn, and I will add to be happy and engaged as well. So we want kids to want to be here and to enjoy their time here and to learn a whole lot. And we know that class size helps that, but class size is not the only factor in doing that and doing that well. That I have met extensively just this morning with Kim Hefner, and Kesmira and I have met too, because as we've made some adjustments at Ames and Central, it's a little bit more complicated to make some of those same adjustments at Hollywood and at Blythe. So we're going to be talking more about that, but I really want to assure people that there's been a lot of careful examination of the students, the groups of students, the kinds of resources, the allocation of our resources that we're able to bring to bear on children. And certainly one of my strong beliefs is that we have wonderful classroom teachers, and I don't mean to take anything away from any of them, but I look at Bill as a music teacher. I think of our special education teachers, our reading specialists, our math interventionists, our social workers, that it is truly a collaborative and comprehensive approach we take to student learning. So when we look at some class sizes that are slightly above that recommended class size in our policy that I absolutely believe that those children will continue to learn and have great opportunities for success in those classrooms. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we look specifically at the recommendation for some waivers, but wanted to point that out because I think it's really, really important, and we've given that a lot of thought over the course of really all last year, but a lot of careful thought and a lot of careful attention just this summer and really just in the past month as we've watched some of our enrollment continue to grow. That's really all I have.
Thanks, Martha. Appreciate you doing all that work, you and the administration doing all that work on that topic. Next item is the consent agenda. So before we talk on that, could the board secretary please read the consent agenda?
Consent agenda includes the minutes of previous board meetings, the personnel report, the payables pre-list of July 31st, and the payables pre-list of August 16th. And also the IMRF resolution to designate Mr. Holmes.
And number 6.
Oh, excuse me. We are also recycling some computers. We have a vendor selected who has purchased those items.
Thanks, Joel. At this point, are there any board members that would like to pull any items off for separate discussion? If not, then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Margie, please call the roll.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Regan?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Abstain.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Marhold?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thanks, Margie. Next up is the Riverside Educational Council. I see Mr. House is here today, so.
Hello. I'd like to start by saying how excited we are for the new year to start, and to say thank you. I've been watching the numbers for enrollment all the past week or so, and even today noticed there are some changes, and we appreciate all of the work that everyone does to make that happen. The district office staff, Ms. Ryan Toy, we're very excited by that. I know that the board recognizes the important connection between class size and learning by the fact that we're recommending adding classes at Central. The REC applauds this decision. At Central, the solution is to add classes, but that's not a possibility at Blythe Park, Hollywood, and Ames at this point. I want to urge the board to be open to ways to help our students have the best possible learning environments at all of our schools, which is something I know you all want as well. Adding support for students, either through hiring teachers for the purpose of team teaching, bringing in paraprofessional support, or other staffing solutions that would help students in larger classes approximate the experience of smaller class sizes. The REC is open to working with the board administration to get the proper support needed in these classrooms. The predicament also speaks to the importance of following our flexible boundary plan, which was created in part because our elementary schools had disparate class sizes. To keep the class sizes similar throughout the district, we encourage the board to reaffirm some tenets of this policy: that students who move in the district after kindergarten are placed in a classroom that has availability based on numbers, and that students are enrolled in kindergarten according to the class size policy. When exceptions are made in kindergarten, that has effect throughout their schooling. The task of maintaining our class sizes is complicated as well, as you know, by the lack of space throughout our district. We encourage the board to continue looking at all options for optimizing and increasing space throughout the district in the most time-efficient manner possible, which is probably the difficulty. Hopefully an increase of space through the strategic plan of our district can be implemented in time to avoid more dissimilar class sizes. Finally, no matter the class size, I think that Riverside, and I think many do, is fortunate to have a staff who strive every day to live in excellence by giving every student the best possible education. And And I'm sure that's true not just for our staff as teachers and paras and secretaries, but also our administration. And I know that our board also strives for living in excellence as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. House, and thank you for the, that's sharing that sentiment. We know our teachers are and paraprofessionals and other staff are very dedicated and to our students, and we really do appreciate that. Next we come to board member comments. Just to remind people, this is something that Dr. Paul introduced, which was basically to give board members an opportunity to talk about any events they attended, or science fairs or concerts. I guess there had not been any since school's not been in session. So, but if anyone has any board member comments, this is the time to make them.
It's a bit out of date at this point, but I think there was an event. Actually, Dave was there as well. This was at the Brookfield Zoo a while back. They had what was it? A poetry. I think it was a reading of poems that students had authored, and it was I think a contest that was held here in District 96 earlier in the year. It was kind of the
As Olmsted.
Exactly. Yes. And just wanted to say it was a great event, and was definitely very appreciative that the event was put on, and appreciative to the zoo as well. I think it was a great way for our students to showcase their talents.
I know the Homestead Society's partner. I don't know if partner's the right word, but I've offered a contest for the last several years, and I think it's something. I know my kids. My oldest daughter likes it, and my youngest daughter is already looking forward to doing it when she gets to first grade. So I think it's a worthwhile program, and it's definitely something that I know my kids appreciate, and I think other kids appreciate as well.
Great. Mm-hmm. Good. All right. So then we next move on to the committee reports. First up is Education Committee. Sherry, do you have any?
Well, our August 3rd meeting, we're on sabbatical, so there isn't much to report other than, Meryl's been working with all the teams all summer, and so she might have the best comments, but we'll be hearing about what's been happening soon. So.
Yes, we had a lot of curriculum work going on this summer. Teachers were here in June, we had at the beginning of August.
Mm-hmm.
Our science teachers from the middle school were here in July. They're getting ready to launch that new curriculum we did last year. So it was a busy summer with lots of dedicated people, and we're ready to launch our ELA curriculum because of all those people willing to come in. We just have a handful left to be trained in September and October.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. Next, we have the Finance Committee. Rich, any report on the Finance Committee?
No report. I think Mr. Holmes is starting his second month, so we'll begin regular meetings here now that he knows where his office is and he's working next to him. So more soon.
Great. Thanks, Rich. And then we have Policy Committee. Dan, do you have any reports on policy? Or?
I think we've recently received updated policies from our press policy. I think there were 5 new policies that are new recommended policy changes, as well as several that are coming up for a 5-year renewal or look again. I think Martha and I are planning on meeting on that in the very near future.
Great. All right. Thanks, Dan. All right. So we now move on to old business. The first item in old business is class size waivers. So at this point, is there a motion for the Board of Education to approve the class sizes for the 2017-2018 school year and the recommendation for 2 sections at Central School as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion about the either the class size in general, the addition of these 2 sections at Central, or of the waivers for the other sections?
I just wanted to mention for whatever teachers are moving for the central classrooms where there's music or whatnot, thank you. Whoever's moving. That's not an easy task to kind of disengage yourself from your normal spot in the building. So, and thank you to Mr. Gatz for
The biggest thing too, I think right now goes to Mr. Radke, Mr. Fernandez, and their group, because they
moving everything.
They've been doing today and tomorrow to get the furniture and desks and things for the students for next week and for the staff.
Well, please thank them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I had a question on sort of what this cost to the district, whether it's teacher salaries, other facilities were.
Yeah, so So the move, it does take the hiring of 2 additional teachers, and I can talk a little bit about that. We have not hired the teachers, but we anticipate on average they're going to have about sort of a 5-year level of experience on our salary schedule. Certainly that also comes with benefits and other things, and I do have some numbers because we talked about previewing that and sharing that information tonight. The other thing is, because we're making some moves, we're moving our Quest programming up to the 3rd floor. It's not a room that's been used for student space for a couple of years, so some additional technology. We're actually moving some of the technology staff out of the 3rd floor and into a space that hadn't been used really for staff, so it doesn't have phone line and data line. So there are some additional costs. If we looked at kind of a minimum level of 2 certified staff with benefits and with what we're understanding in terms of some additional charging carts for the one-on-one devices or the technology devices that are used, a projection system to use up on the 3rd floor, some whiteboards. We're looking at on the low end $114,000 and $340,000 on the high end, and it's not going to be at that high end because I know Mr. Gatz has looked at some real candidates that I'm going to be interviewing tomorrow, but the high end was projected to be about $183,000. We don't anticipate it being at that high end. It's going to be closer to that lower end.
So do we expect to start the school year or shortly thereafter with the new staff in place?
We expect to start the school year. That's our expectation. If things, if we're able to make the hires based on the recommendations, Mr. Gatz and a team have already been interviewing today. That as soon as we kind of had this plan, they went to work in terms of screening applicants. I think it's another area where Riverside's very fortunate that this is an attractive place to work, and so we had applicants eager to take a position. Even that's opening up in late August, or mid-August still, but yeah. And then I'll make just another comment about the flexible student transfer policy. So I have taken a very close look at that. I have operationalized that policy as is really my responsibility, and I looked at a number of parameters. So we talk about proximity and we talk about families, and those are both really important things to talk about as we talk about potentially transferring students. And so I used a framework of looking at students not being more than 1.5 miles away from the school door, essentially from their home to the school door. And in a couple cases, if I looked at actually initially, we were looking at students that might transfer from Central over to Ames. I did find that we had families that would be sort of 1.7 to 1.9 miles away. That is not explicit in the policy, but that actually is a number in our school code. So I feel like that was a very reasonable figure to look at. I also then looked at sibling configuration. So if we're going to move one child in 2nd or 3rd grade where we had the larger enrollment, we're going to move the kindergarten sibling also. Our goal, the policy states specifically that we will keep families together. So then all of a sudden I realized if I was moving an entire family, I was just creating a different bubble elsewhere potentially. And then I will also just say, and I will say that we've made a couple transfers, and I just want to thank those families for being incredibly gracious, because there are always family circumstances. So families move to a community for all kinds of reasons that we only know a small amount about. And so to tell a family in August that they are going to go to a different school. What we do know, on the good news, is I've talked to a lot of families that were transferred at one point or another. And kids move in, families move in, you get settled in the new school, and guess what? Nobody wants to leave after they've started. So if you recall, we made, I think, that offer to some Central families that had been transferred from Ames back in kindergarten, and nobody wants to go. It becomes their school. It's where children have friends. It's where the families get involved with the school activities. So it is a complex part of our efforts to balance class size. We've been able to do some balancing, but it is not the 100% solution in terms of how we do that. So, but some efforts have been made, and I really do owe a thank you to the families that said, okay, we can do that. And the other thing I feel really fortunate about is I absolutely believe all 5 of our schools are wonderful. I mean, I know we're talking about the 4 elementaries, but families have said, well, how different are they? And I said, you know what? There's not a bad choice here. There's not a bad option here. And that's really powerful and really valuable. So.
Did you want to, you mentioned during your report, you wanted to say a few words about the classes that are slightly larger than the recommended numbers?
So at Hollywood and at Blythe, we are making some recommendations. The waiver will come up as, it's Ames 1st and 3rd grade, but it's by a much smaller number, and then at Blythe 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And at Hollywood, we had originally in the waiver said K1, 2, and 3. Actually, the K number has dropped down by 1, so we are at 20 in kindergarten. So the waiver request will be for grades 1, 2, and 3. Kim Hefner and I, Casimir Gorman and I have met. We really look at the available resources that we had in terms of parapros. So I know today Mrs. Hefner had shared that she is going to put a parapro in really each class with the exception of second grade. Now that's based, those parapros come up because there might be an identification of some children with special needs that are in the class. We really looked at that level of need. This is not stealing sort of from one to sort of accommodate the other. This is really where we feel we are able to put that additional para support in the classroom. We've talked about some similar things at Blythe, and then at both schools we have the reading specialists, the math interventionists, social workers, and special education teachers. So we've looked carefully at, is there a way that we can staff and schedule those specialists to make sure that they are really supporting core instruction first and foremost. And that is really the plan that looks very feasible. I think the other thing is we have made this very clear commitment to monitor, to continue to problem solve, and that if we are looking at groupings or situations that are not workable or we feel are negative for children, we will come back and make recommendations for those additional resources. But right now we feel like it's kind of a unique opportunity to really think very critically about the allocation of our current resources. And I think also to point out to the community that to have all these resources is wonderful, but for people to really understand that they have a direct impact on student learning every single day. And I think sometimes the people that are kind of working in the background, you ask your child who their teacher is and they say Mrs. So-and-so, and they don't know that Mrs. So-and-so is the one that does most of their reading instruction perhaps, or has really supported their math instruction, or is really helping them cope socially and emotionally. And so I think we want that. We want kids to feel like that person in front of the classroom is their main teacher and their go-to person, but as we know, there are a lot of other go-to people that make that whole equation work. So, Casimir and Kim, you're back there. Is there more you want to say about the Hollywood and Blythe configuration specifically?
If you wouldn't mind maybe stepping to the microphone over here so you can be sort of seen on camera, that would be good.
I would give it up to Casey by portable mic.
Called out now.
I just want to thank you all for considering all the schools. I know that the addition of the classroom primarily benefits the kiddos at Central and Ames. They'll be able to, but I feel like Hollywood, I feel like we're in a really good shape to start the year. Throughout the summer, we've had conversations. Throughout the entire summer, we've talked about numbers. Our biggest problem right now is that we have 14 students who attended Hollywood last year who have not registered for this year. And so our numbers aren't definite. We really don't know. But the sense that I have and the numbers that I've crunched, every class at Hollywood is either the same or less, has fewer students, with the exception of one class, and that was our bubble class last year, second grade, 25 kiddos, that is rolling up to third grade. So our greatest number in that class will be 25. We're hoping for a little bit less, but we're not sure because not everyone is registered. So if I could encourage families to register, that's our biggest concern, I think, right now. Other than,
I'm just going to interject, Kim, because our numbers are based on an assumption that those families are coming back.
Right. Yes.
So we don't think we're adding 14 more in the next 2 days. We don't think.
But we're just trying to figure out,
Yeah,
this is kind of like the worst case scenario is the numbers that we have, I think. Unless we have a bunch of move-ins, which is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is that I know that the greatest factor, well, class size is one factor that impacts student learning. The greatest factor is, and it's been researched time and again, is the quality of the teacher in the classroom. And I really believe, and it's not just our classroom teachers, but it's our entire staff. We use them very flexibly, and we have exceptional people who are extremely collaborative and who look to the child first to help support their learning. And so I am extremely confident that we are going to provide an excellent opportunity for our kiddos to learn as much as possible this year. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to echo a little bit of what Kim had said. I appreciate how cognizant everyone has been in considering all perspectives and all viewpoints and looking at the best needs that work for our students. My teachers have been in and out of Blythe throughout the week, and talking to them about the numbers, they're like, it's not a problem. Like, they're ready to go. They know, they feel confident. And I think that does speak to what Ms. Hefner just said about, teachers that understand curriculum, that understand students, that are well equipped to handle. And then the class size almost becomes that secondary issue because you have an effective teacher in front of them. And we are filled in this district with highly effective, quality trained teachers. The other part that I'm speaking with Martha is the idea with our small schools too, is that when we think about transferring and being just aware of the fact that there might be 23 or 24 in a second grade classroom, but remember those are the only 23 or 24 kids in that grade level. And there's that whole social emotional piece. The ability for students to find friends of different interests, to have different playmates, to have kids that have similar ideas and similar passions. And so when we talk about pulling out a couple kids to make those class sizes smaller in the one section school, remember that's that whole grade. And so that's something that I'm always aware of too, because I always want that fluidity to be there for the students to have those good social experiences and feel really good and safe. And have choice, within their school day. So, but thank you again for everything that you've done over the past few weeks, considering our class size.
Thanks, Ms. Gorman, Ms. Hefner. Both of you have bring very interesting insights. I mean, it's a much more nuanced sort of situation than just simply counting numbers. So it's very good to get your thoughts on that. So appreciate that. Does any other board member have any comments about this motion?
I have a question. You said that at Hollywood they're going to get there's going to be a paraprofessional in every grade except second grade. And I guess I'm wondering what your question is. Looking at the numbers, second grade seems to be higher than first grade, and then I guess what are we doing for Blythe?
Do you want to talk about that?
The second grade will have a parapro half the day, so it's just not the full day. And it's based on student needs. It's much more than just numbers in a classroom. One group of 20 students is very different from another group of 20 students. And so we look at the needs of the children coming into the classroom and allocate our support where it's most needed and where we believe we have the greatest impact.
You want to talk about how your paras are going to be assigned and
Right. So I just similar to what Kim had just said again. My resource teacher came in. Oh, I have the mic. Okay. Our resource teacher from Blythe came in today, and we sat for about an hour and a half, and we just looked at the students that make up the various different grade levels, and we looked at our parapros and the times and how we're going to effectively allocate that. We do have a plan in place for the first week of school, and then we're going to debrief and come back again, and then we're going to make any type of adjustments so that we look at those peak times, those times of high need, either socially or academically, where that extra support in the classroom is going to be needed. And so, like I said, everyone's on board and everyone's planning, and this is not new for us. This is an old hat.
So the team, you have the same kind of similar quantity of paraprofessionals.
Right, and we look around and we look at how to use them flexibly, and they push in and out of classrooms based on what the makeup or of that classroom may be.
Thank you. There's one thing I would like to mention. I don't know if any of the parents I'm going to echo a statement from Martha. I don't know if any of the parents that did get that unfortunate call that they're going to have to transfer to another school if they're here tonight. But a number of years ago when we were first coming to the district, we got that call as well. It was a pretty bitter disappointment on that day that it happened. That said, with a number of years past, our girl went to Central. She was supposed to go to Blythe, but came down to Central. Had a great number of years here. Definitely something that right away became evident. We wouldn't change the experience for anything. And she's now matriculated onto Hauser, and it was a great experience. And it's something that you come to. It's a disappointment in the short term, but it's something that's quickly overcome.
If I I can just sort of chime in here. I understand where our policy is in this, and I do understand, I mean, I'm very attuned to what's going on with our condition, with the space requirements teachers. But I sort of look, I know we're going to talk about this later, but the sort of issue of parity between the schools, it just seems that we're spending a heck of a lot of money on Central, and I'm not saying we don't need the teachers, but we're making the other schools jump through hoops to sort of accommodate this situation, and we're spending $114,000 plus to accommodate Central. It just doesn't seem right. I mean, it seems like we should be doing something more for these schools. And I mean, I understand where we're at, and I don't know really what the solution is, but that I do have reservations regarding that, because I think all our schools should be treated the same way.
Any other comments or thoughts on this topic?
I hear what you're saying, but I think as we go through this master facility planning, which we're going to be talking about later today, I think we need to start viewing our district as a district. And I know it's hard right now because we haven't always followed the policy. So there have been age groups that get bigger in certain areas, but if we are enacting the flexible bound, if we move forward and continue with the flexible boundary plan, it's a district and it has to be fluid. So that adding a classroom at Central is actually alleviating the crowding everywhere. I think that would be the plan. However, because it hasn't been completely adhered to over the last 10 years or 6 years or whatever it is, it's created these bubbles. But I would just say, moving forward, I think we need to think of it as a district. So if I move into the district and I buy a house, I'm guaranteed I'm going to go to school. My kids are going to go to school in District 96, but I'm not guaranteed my neighborhood school. I think we need to somehow get that.
That's very explicit in that policy and in when the policy is formulated, as you say. That's a very good point.
And I know it's very different. I know as a resident of the Hollywood section, I know it is so different because, we talk about these policies, and it's so hard to have a policy that really captures the uniqueness of Hollywood. It's across First Avenue. It's a little community. It's a separate town. There's so many different things. So I do think it's going to be very difficult to, if we wanted to develop a new policy, to capture all of that uniqueness. But I think, for me, I think we just need to start thinking about it as a district. So opening a classroom, whether it be at Central or Ames, or say a room opened up at Blythe or Hollywood, I think we need to think of it as it's alleviating all the issues everywhere. But
I think what's complicated, we've talked, taking, 24 students and saying we're going to have 2 classes of 12 and 12 doesn't really make sense. So it speaks to, I think, what Casimir Gorman shared is that sort of that social context. That sounds ideal, but really where we've lived it has not been an ideal for children, that there's almost a time when too small is too small. Mm-hmm. So I think Bill used a term, what'd you say, accommodate or mimic, kind of do the best we can to create sort of a similar situation. And really that's what we're talking about here tonight, is how do we use those other resources, because the splitting it up and divide, at Central and Ames, where we then decided we moved to 3 or 4 sections, at a Hollywood or Blythe to say let's just do 2 sections, the numbers don't quite work out that way either.
And I also think about it, if we don't open these 2 rooms up at Central through the course of the year, as people move in, it doesn't matter where they're moving, it's going to be crowded somewhere. So,
right. No,
it's giving the space for growth.
Right, I understand that, and I'm glad that Hollywood and Blythe are getting the additional services. I just fundamentally feel that, we're spending $114,000 at Central. I feel we should be doing more for those schools if we're going to be spending that much money here. I think that's just the way I'm looking at it, that Blythe and Hollywood should be treated equally. And obviously Ames as well, I don't want to forget them, but they don't seem to have the space problem that everyone else does.
They do, which is hilarious that we say that, because last year, that is exactly where the
That's why we split the...
Well, and it's not the most ideal. Yeah.
But I think when I say we're going to monitor and to provide that assurance that if Kim Hefner or Casimir Gorman come to me and say, this mix of kids is more complicated than I thought, and we need to do something more in addition, I will be coming with a recommendation to the board to say, is it an additional parapro? Is it an expansion of our reading support services? Is it an expansion of our special education services? I think we have to be open to those ideas, and I know I think this conversation came up last year about Ames. We weren't going to wait and see, and why are we willing to wait and see? I feel like I absolutely believe Kim and Casimir have given this very careful thought. They really know the children, for the most part, that are in place. As Kim said, it's really not a lot different than last year, even at Hollywood School, but that I know they both feel comfortable, and I certainly feel comfortable coming to all of you and saying, we have a situation here that's not positive for children, and so we need to talk about if additional resources are needed. But we're going to work internally with the resources we have first, because I think that's what makes most sense, and we have a high degree of confidence that's absolutely going to work too. So,
any other comments about this topic at this point? If not, then Marjorie, please call the roll.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Regan?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi?
Nay.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thanks, Margie. So the next item on the old business agenda is there a motion for the Board of Education to modify the board's May 23rd, 2017 disciplinary decision regarding student 2017-10 on the basis of terms discussed in closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? Then Margie, please call the roll.
Mr. Marhol?
Aye.
Ms. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Regan?
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber?
Aye.
Mr. Hunt?
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi? Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thanks, Margie. We next come to new business, and the first item in new business is the summary of the architectural projects for consideration for District 96. Just so we have the context, I think about, I don't know, it was about 6 months ago, Martha and our architect and a group of administrators and 2 board representatives, Linda and Rich, have been meeting to look at district facilities, what we have, what we need, and I think this is the initial report on that topic, an initial overview. So we'd like to.
So that we have Carrie Matlack, our architect from DLA, who's been working with us with the Facilities Advisory Committee, and we're going to share a summary of projects tonight.
Yes, well, thank you. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so nice to see you all again. This has been a long process, a complicated process, which we knew going in. The issues that you're having here at your district are unique to Riverside, as they are with each and every client that we work with. And the great part about this is that we're devising a customized solution, options for your district specifically. Some of the things that we've done to accommodate that and to analyze that in our very methodical way, in our process that we've used, is to meet with staff, students. We've had a lot of meetings with your principals, understanding all of the trials and tribulations that you go through every year, as you've been discussing here tonight, and that's certainly illustrated at when you're upon your first week of school here very shortly. You have some great challenges in front of you with regards to space, and how we've been looking at this is through the process of determining what you might be able to solve in your space concerns through the lens of safety, equity, learning optimization for all students. That's very important to note. But in that process, not only have we talked to everyone, we've went through with our engineering staff and our architects and walked through each building, did a top-down review of all of your facilities, looked at your roofs, looked at your mechanical systems, electrical, plumbing, and so forth, all the architectural items in the building, and have come up with an operations and maintenance list. Now, I will say your buildings are in good shape, but as aging facilities are, and this is just how it goes, you have to maintain a plan to upkeep those. And there are aspects of your facilities that need attention. These are all being documented, and these reports will be compiled at a later date. What we're presenting tonight is really a summary of the capital improvements for consideration, really how to solve those growth issues. And they're just options. They're just really text descriptions at this point. There are no drawings per se. They are just ideas, and we want to present that to the board because the committee realizes that the board wants some involvement at this level to understand what's been discussed and where we go from here. So at the tail end of this conversation, we'll talk about what potential schedule we'll have ahead for compiling that document and give you some options for that, and then what options we have for community outreach, which is our next step in this process. Okay? So with that, we talked a little bit about how we've broken this up, and parity is one of the items that we've taken a look at your district. And really, now we understand that the schools are very different. They're very different ages, they look very different, they're different occupancies, and that's understandable. But the parity that we're speaking of is really the issue with how you're treating specials and security, and where the students eat, where they have PE, and how those conflict. And it's different in each building. So each building is analyzed. We're talking about pros and cons of each, and then we talk about what those solutions might be to help alleviate that. Doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be doing this in the future. It means that these are items for consideration. This is our third-party perspective and reviewing it with your committee to determine if it's worthy of your consideration. Okay, so with that, we're going to walk through each building and talk about those aspects that I just mentioned. And we're going to start with Ames. And Ames, as everyone has mentioned, and you're probably very well aware of the conversation, it is challenged spatially. We've done a capacity study where we've compared the square footage that is used for education, physical education, band, music, whatever, all those spaces that are occupiable, and we've taken that and divided it by the number of students that were in the schools last year. And that ratio is included in our capacity study. Now again, that's last year's data, but it still gives you a good perspective and comparison to kind of realize what the differences are between each building. And Ames is one of the lowest ones. It's not the lowest, but it is one of the lowest ones. It's the second lowest. And that's at 58 square feet per student. Again, this is just usable space. This isn't the circulation and so forth in the walls. So it's important to note. But it's a good way to take a quick look at your school and get a kind of a perspective in comparison to the rest of them. But each building is different, like I said. And the cafeteria and physical education space is now being utilized in the same space, which is different. And that change happened fairly recently, because you are very nimble in how you attack problems here, and you are definitely creative when it comes to getting space for students, which is fantastic and certainly encouraging. So also the library is being shared with some performing arts spaces, which is also a challenge there, and certainly different types of activities that would take place here. So that is the good part about Ames is that there's actually a number of small itinerant spaces, which is great for small breakouts and for one-on-ones. That building has the most out of all of the district's buildings, so that's great. There's good points to all, right? With every pro, there's a con and so forth. So one of the solutions that exists to come up with this is to come up with a solution for it is obviously adding additional square footage to the lot size would help into the building. We know that you've purchased that piece of property on Repton, and that is certainly going to help with that. But as our analysis has concluded with the village, that the hardscape, which is the impervious surface, including building and play area and parking, is really high in comparison to what the village would like. So the more space and the more property that you could acquire would be beneficial to the expansion and what would be allowed. And there will be a variance process with that, and that's one of the cons associated with this build out. But it's definitely an option to grab some more space and work through that process. Now what that might look like is certainly something that needs to be discussed and weighed, because those are important decisions based upon all of the problems that you have throughout your district and not just at Ames. So that's very, very important consideration to take place. That's one of the solutions. Now the others, moving on to Blythe, that is an 88 square foot per student ratio, which is, as you can see, there's a little bit more flexibility in there, a little bit more space, which is very good. It's not exorbitant by any means, but it's obviously there's more space allocated there.
Could you state what the square footage per student is at Ames?
58, I believe. Yes. And then, so how security is worked here is a little bit differently than it is at the other buildings, in that the office is not directly attached to the entry to the building. So that's different. Whereas at Ames, it actually is. Okay? So that might be a little obstacle for the district that they might want to take a look at. And the advantages of Blythe, though, is that there's a play area that is pretty decent size, a nice amphitheater. There's some maintenance things that need to take place there, but it's a very nice space, and it's adjacent to a Park District property. So outside-wise, it's got some nice property. And then also, there is an auditorium space there that's a very large space that could meet, some possible flexibility needs for the future if the district wanted to take a look at doing something with that as well. So these are kind of the options that we have here at Blythe. Now, to solve the office problem, you could work some different doors to kind of create more of a man trap for entry into the building with some key fob solutions, but that's something to consider. Or you could relocate the office on the opposite side of the building. But those are ways around that. And then also the auditorium you could take a look at getting rid of the pitch in the floor and leveling that out and making that more of a multi-purpose space for possibly professional development or other ideas in the district like 21st century educational space. Those are just some options for you. And the central is at 56 square foot per student in that ratio, which is actually the lowest. And they have a shared cafeteria with Hauser, which creates a little bit of a burden because the extended lunch periods. Although the plus side of that is that this is the only elementary that has access to hot lunches. And they have several ADA issues. As you well know, the building has a lot of stairs, various ways to traverse the building, and that is an issue, especially when traveling to the nurse's office, because the nurse's office is located more on the Hauser side of the complex, and so maybe traveling up and down is a little cumbersome if you're needing the nurse's office. And then, like I said, the cafeteria is also being used by Hauser, so they're inconvenienced as well by this shared version. And also, one of the Hauser concerns is that the auditorium cannot accommodate all of the student population. And so they'd like to see something done about that. And possibly, having the difference between Hauser and Central is that the security, again, Hauser actually has an attached office to the entry to the building, and Central does not. And that so allows a point of entry, which is inconsistent on just one other side of the building. Now it even grows even more inconsistent when you put the district office in the center of that and allow for a point of entry in the same fashion, which allows a visitor to potentially get to the rest of the building prior to getting to the district office. So those are maybe some issues that the district might want to consider dealing with. Now, the ways to do that, one option is certainly to consider relocating the district office elsewhere, because space seems to be a pretty big premium at Central, so that might be one of the easier ways to get some square footage. Thought was given to moving that to the Ames location with a possible addition, but that might just be changing the problem location from Central to Ames. Because either way, space is a premium for your students. So some of the pros for moving the district office elsewhere would be it would be increasing the square footage at Central. There would be, I neglected to mention that the district office is also separated. It's the special education and IT are on the top floor, and the district office, superintendent, business manager, and so forth are on in the very lowest level of the building. So those two are not together. The pro of this is that they do have access to students, most of the population of the district, almost over 1,000 in this one building. So it has to be, that is a nice convenience for the district. However, they're split in between the floors as well. So the cohesive team, if they were to relocate someplace, maybe a cohesive team could be considered. The professional development space may be considered at a new location, and access to the public. Obviously, parking is an issue here as well, and so we would remove some of that district traffic elsewhere. And improve safety, because being able to button down that location as well. And improved work environment for the staff. So that's just some of the pros for that. And then the cons, obviously, some cost and administration team away from the teaching environment. Another solution for Central may be to create some space by infilling one of the courtyards. Now, this is where we get a little bit more creative as architects, because this is a complicated building, and solving ADA issues and implosion of space is not necessarily easy, especially on these tight urban sites that you have. But we have done things like this before in the past, and possibly filling in that center courtyard for the use of a cafeteria space and potentially an elevator that would make some of those levels accessible. Not the entire building, but some, and then with an inclusion of some ramps as well. Moving the district office to the other side of the hall to be adjacent towards the front end of the building, that would be very helpful as well, in that it would provide a different level of security, and then it would mimic the other side of Hauser, which would help out a great deal and be consistent. Relocating the nurse might be an option if the district office were to move and go into that space and be a little bit closer to the students over at Central, and then thereby increasing safety and security throughout. Now, with this, there are a number of options, and some of the issues at Central include a smaller gymnasium space, and they'd like to see that improved. If we were to possibly add an addition, slight addition onto the back side of the building towards the parking lot, perhaps we could expand that a little bit. And then also begin to take a look at creative uses of space that we might be able to gain green space, perhaps even a green rooftop area, which is, I know, pretty cutting edge, but it is a concept that might be considered, because we're trying to be as creative as possible to attain space. Just a thought. And then the Hauser solution would be to install an operable partition in the back of the auditorium to allow some flexibility to open up the walls, to allow some more seats to be aligned in the corridor for special occasions. Just a quick, simple solution. Another solution might be to renovate that entirely and make it more of a flexible space that could be reconfigured for other uses for the building. And that would mean leveling that out and not having a pitch on the floor, and maybe collapsible seating and so forth, and opening it up towards the cafeteria, which would allow some more flexibility in that, which would be some drastic changes, but it is an opportunity to take a look at providing flexible space, because as we have analyzed your facilities, flexible space is definitely what you need to come up with these strategies each and every year that you have some occupancy changes. Hollywood Elementary is the smallest school and definitely has some space concerns when it comes to sharing Quest, music, and art all in one small size classroom. Obviously, those types of functions require different types of storage, and I know that the principal is working on that this year as well. The fact that art needs tables and that music does not, doesn't work out too well. So they're trying to be very flexible and pushing those aside and trying to work within that space.
You just state the square footage per student.
Oh, I'm sorry, 75 square foot per student. So it is a little bit higher. It was lower, but then pre-K was moved over to Blythe, which has helped with that number as well. And the gym is also the cafeteria, and the psychologists and occupational therapists are working on the stage, which might be an area of concern for those types of functions. So they are in need of small itinerant spaces. Speech is most often conducted in the hallways, And security is also different here in that the office is not adjacent to the front entry of the building. The building would benefit from additional square footage. However, that site is, as we all know, very constrained. But parking is shared on the blacktop. So perhaps displacing the parking as a solution might be helpful in that there could be some expansion opportunity if we got rid of the parking, put it on the street. That would mean a negotiation with the Village of Brookfield to determine if that was even feasible or not. But it is an option to relocate the parking. As it's
some recent experience with that type of negotiation.
a little bit. Yes, at RB, we've negotiated with the village, and so you completely threw me off track with that.
You're ready to move on to outdoor green space.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the outdoor green space at each facility. So the idea here is obviously each site is very tight, and so we're having to be even more creative with some thought related to this topic. And sometimes looking at it in a traditional sense and sometimes looking at it in a more of a creative sense. So starting with Ames, each and every building has a conflict with parking and hardscape for play, and that is important to note as a safety concern. So relocating the parking from that would be helpful in any way, shape, or form that we could, whether that's street or an adjacent negotiation with some local parking lot that's in the nearby vicinity. So that would be helpful. Also, if there were more properties available for the district to purchase, if that could be a consideration too, to expand in a more traditional sense for green space and expanded play area and potentially a garden, as a lot of the district staff have talked to me about and wanted some type of garden for the students to utilize. And then, so at Ames, so that was the answer, potential answer there. And then the second solution would be, again, to relocate the parking or to gain more space with an adjacent property. At Blythe, there is ample outdoor area, as mentioned earlier, and that's important to note and good to note. And the adjacent district, Park District property is very helpful. Central is another challenge, and probably the biggest challenge because of Woodside Road. And the reason being is that there's more than 1,000 students converging on this location on a regular basis, and that is somewhat of a safety concern, as anyone who's dropped off a student or attended this in the morning certainly understands. So one of the biggest challenges is to come up with a solution for that, or looking at a solution for that, and perhaps extending a traffic study in the future for something to determine if there is a viable solution. And I know that the local jurisdiction has looked at that in the past. So again, here, if adjacent homes, more land, that would be helpful again. And then also, if we went ahead with any of the renovations that we talked about previously, that a rooftop solution for outdoor play might be something that we could consider here, as well as a synthetic turf field in place of the baseball field that's out there currently. Again, those are just thoughts about what potentially could happen with Central, and how that would obviously help Hauser as well.
Can I ask a question, Carrie?
Yep.
When you talk about changing things at Central to address the ADA or the accessibility issues, is there any solution out there that completely solves accessibility at Central? That
No.
that your team has considered?
Well, not 100%, but it is pretty close.
Okay.
I'd say about 75%.
Okay.
And that's just what we've studied so far. We'd have to get in a little bit more in depth with that, but looking at the different elevations, and certainly, putting in an elevator and working with different ramps in different locations to accommodate all of those levels. It would be challenging, but I feel that there is a solution that could attain a good portion of the building accessible.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question though about your last comment about the athletic field for Central? I think you said you'd recommend replacing it with an artificial turf.
I said you can consider that because what happens is the staff is concerned that the saturation of the field, that students can't go out and play because it's a bit of an issue with the mud. It doesn't drain well, and so they track that back into the building or get filthy when they're playing. So one of the solutions is potentially a synthetic turf. A lot of elementary schools are looking at that now, and junior highs are looking at that now for that purpose, so that it's less maintenance costs for their staff, and then they can use it in right after inclement weather. And again, removing, so Hollywood, something to consider, removing the parking from the street to the street, and then also more land would help certainly there as well. And probably the most cost-effective solution would be to remove the parking from the lot and create more of a play space for students in that area. And the teacher collaboration, certainly that's in need at all the buildings, and needing some flexible space. All the conference rooms, when I toured the buildings and spoke with all the teachers and staff, that it was hard to even have time in that for me to meet with them. So that it's being constantly used, which is very important to know. Throughout all facilities. And then full day kindergarten, based on current grade level configurations, the facility-based needs for full day kindergarten indicate that one classroom would be needed at Central and one at Ames. What that forecast would be for the future, and if the community should like that as a service, then it may grow, but that's a study that you might need to do if you were to consider that in the future. So this is where we're at to date, and we highlighted these projects because it seems to be of some urgency in your district, as opposed to waiting for the completion of the report, which can happen pretty quickly, but we believe that community engagement is important to your board and would like to proceed how you would like to proceed with that element. And we can do community engagement before we compile this entire report, or we can compile the entire report and then go to community engagement. Those are your choices at this point. Either way, all the facets have been completed, and we would like to take a look at where we need to go next as far as the completion of this.
I'd just like to say I think that you and your committee have done a great job. I mean, you've done a very thorough analysis of all the buildings and identified a number of things that could be improved, and also have come up with some creative ideas. So I'd like to thank you for that. Obviously, there's a huge number of things on the list, and presumably we're not going to be able to get to them, next year. If ever.
I was going to say, if money weren't an issue.
But I did also want to applaud you for looking at parity as well. I think that's very important, and as Dave was talking about earlier, it's a very important thing, but it's also a very difficult thing. And one of the things that makes it difficult is exactly what you were saying, which is that there are many different dimensions in which things are unequal. There's the square footage per student. There's huge differences there. There's differences of over 50% between the two big schools, which have less square footage, and the two small schools, which have much more square footage per student. There's the amount of outdoor space, the number of small rooms, which I didn't realize was such a beneficial thing. But Ames has a lot of small rooms. I didn't realize that was a good thing, but you're saying it's a good thing. ADA access, where there's a cafeteria, and so all of these different things. And what makes it hard is you can't compare them. You can't say, well, how do you trade off between having nice outdoor space and having small rooms and all these other things? They're different kinds of things. So. Well, it's very important to talk about parity, and there's another element too, which is that a lot of our problems have to do with the fact that things are discrete. And when we're looking at the small schools and the big schools have certain advantages. Very clearly, we can split 3 sections to 4 sections, which we can't do at Hollywood or Blythe. But there are other advantages to being at Hollywood and Blythe. For example, just think about the principals. We have one principal at Hollywood. We have one principal at Blythe. We have one principal at Central and one principal at Ames. Mr. Gatz has 20 sections, 21 sections. He's got to mentor all of those teachers. He's got to evaluate them. Ms. Hefner and Ms. Gorman has 6. They can spend much more time, individually with their teachers. So there's trade-offs all across the board. So I think we should always bear in mind parity, but I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where, oh yeah, they're equal, because it's not even well-defined. It's not even a well-defined thing. So as long as we're keeping it in mind, I totally. So I respect the fact that you're pointing that out, but I just think it's a difficult sort of problem to get right. So
I agree. I don't think there's a way that we would ever make the schools equal, nor do we really want to, because there's some uniqueness to each school that you want to protect. However, I do think there are some glaring things where I do think it's affecting instruction differently at different schools. So I think those are the things that we need to look through and decide what is important. On a side note, I just want to say I sit on the committee with Rich, and the last few months, the meetings, just to let the board know, it's been so helpful. We've gone through these 4 years of just kind of change. We're just slapping things together in the beginning of the year, trying to, we have administrators who there's no long-term history, and these facilities are difficult. So sitting in a room for hours, and some of these meetings were hours, with everybody in the room being able to talk, and just, I really feel like it was a really great growth opportunity for all of our administrators, for me as a board member. These are the things that I've been wanting to talk about since I got on the board, really tackling these issues that we deal with every year at the start of every school year. We're always talking about class size. We're always talking about this. Like, these are the things I'm really excited that we actually get to start looking at, because I think we can make our way towards alleviating this drama that we have every year. So I just, for the board to know, I think while we think the process might be going slower than we anticipated, it's been very deliberate and very helpful from my perspective.
So what I'm wondering is, since you and Rich have been on the committee and thinking about this, how do you think we should organize our discussion around these? Because there's many topics, and what are you guys thinking? Should we try to prioritize some of them tonight, or should we? What do you think we should?
I think that to keep this process moving along, we all felt as a committee that this was the right time to lay everything out in a board meeting, in an open board meeting, to bring the rest of the board as well as the community up to speed on exactly where we're at. Carrie did a fantastic job on laying everything out here, and I think when we talk about parity in the way that you laid this out here, it's going to be nearly impossible to achieve parity amongst all the schools for all the reasons that we just saw here. But it's important for us to consider this and make conscious decisions. So I think I'd like us to follow Carrie's outline here and really just prioritize each of these issues.
And sort of just like go take them one by one and sort of get a sentiment. Is this something that we think is sort of an immediate need or a less immediate?
And straw poll each one.
Okay.
Carrie, is that what you were kind of expecting?
Sure.
You would like some direction?
And presumably, I mean, if the board is unsure about some points, we want to think more about them, I guess we can always just say we're going to defer that until the future if we can't sort of decide, I guess. Is that?
I would also, I think we need to, I know you had addressed the community engagement part, and I think before we leave tonight, I think we need to have a
plan for that.
Plan of what the next step is with, because we certainly want community engagement. We want stakeholders to be able to talk about what's important to them. I mean, I know you mentioned this earlier, but it's important to note students last year were interviewed, they had surveys, teachers, administrators. So this has been a huge process coming to this point, and we definitely want to get to the community as well. And so I think we can't leave this table without thinking about that step next, so that we can execute it and keep moving, because we would like to be able to do some of these projects sooner than later.
One last point, I think our takeaway from this process right here, what we would like is for the committee to have direction. We want to be as efficient as possible and move on board priorities. But certainly the committee was created to keep it efficient. So, as far as Linda and I are concerned, we want to know what you guys want, and we want to keep the train moving down the track. Keep it moving down the track so we know what we can achieve before next school year. And clearly, given the scope of projects that we're looking at here, this is going to be a multi-year project. Right. It's going to be a multi-year project.
So should we just go through the list and sort of just get a sentiment of like?
And as we're going through the list,
does everyone agree with that approach? Yeah. I mean, is that okay? You guys agree with that approach? Just going through the list, or what do you think down at the other end of the table?
I'm concerned that there's not a lot of understanding of what each of these costs.
Oh, well, yeah.
Even ballpark, and I know that ballpark costs are really hard to do for some of these things, but there's some low-hanging fruit, relocating doors or relocating offices, but auditorium changes, I imagine, are going to be pricey. And I think the Ames renovation is almost a separate issue because we have that property with the intent to create the space that we need.
So are you thinking that we could sort of assign a priority to things, but the fact that we say something is high priority doesn't mean that we want to do it until we obviously we need to know much more. We need to know the price. We need to know all the rest. Essentially,
This
obviously.
is a scaffold. This is not detailed enough for me to say, yes, I want a rooftop play space at Central, because I don't have a drawing, I can't see, and I know that's difficult.
Assigning a priority right now
This just means we want to look at it more.
Would it be nice to have,
vet by the committee, and then we're going to come back with an order of magnitude for pricing.
My concern with that is when we prioritize, say like that green, which is top priority, but then it turns out to be astronomically expensive. We can't do it, but there were like 3 other options we could do for that price. That might have lower priority.
And that, go on.
That's my concern. I mean,
Maybe we can just go through and like.
I think we need to have.
I think that what you want to prioritize are the problems that you have, what you want to deal with, and then we can bring you options for those. These are just concepts, quick concepts to show you this is one way to deal with it. There's many ways to come up with solutions for issues in your district. But if there was an overarching problem that you wanted to deal with, like the space at Ames or outdoor play areas, those types of things, I think a priority list would help the committee move forward.
You guys do. I'd be open for more to have that type of discussion about what are our problems and what we're trying to do. I'll prioritize and then come back with sort of
do some more work and
put like a green central.
Yeah.
I would probably assume that's not a high priority.
No. Well, I mean, I'm almost curious.
I'm just gonna throw it out there.
I take your point on the problems, but that's also very generic. We know what our problems are in some generic sense. I would like to get something more concrete in the sense that you put some thought into some ideas, and like I think we can just eliminate some of them right off the bat. Possibly, we maybe whittle it down from 20 to 5 or something like that.
Because I think within, for me, I think within the parity conversation, a lot of our problems are in there, or a lot of the things that maybe some of us are going to place a high priority on, or some might not, like security at the front entrances, things like that. I think within that. So for me, I think if we just go through the list
and just get a sense.
And then kind of get a sense of where everybody is on everything, and then, I mean...
So do you want to lead the discussion through the list, since you've been on top of this?
Lead the discussion through the list. Unless Carrie wants to.
Unless Carrie wants to.
Would you like a chair? I feel like you're just standing.
I have to grab a pen.
Okay. So going under the page 1, Parity, and under Ames, clearly, we just bought property next to Ames, so we are probably thinking it's a high priority to build something there.
So should we just say high, medium, low? We just go around the table, high, medium, just get initial thoughts? Okay, so let's maybe start and just go through.
The context, I think, for that is square footage, right? And it's space.
Wait, you guys are all leaving? This is really getting good. I'm totally kidding. I'm just joking. It's always when I start talking.
Yeah, it's you.
All right. Sorry. So, Ames space, Ames addition, Ames increase the space. So again, we're not committing to anything. We're not saying we're going to do it. We're just sort of saying whether it's a high priority or not, right? So maybe just start. You could go just say high, medium, low.
High priority, and that communication with the village needs to happen as soon as possible. And I know we've already begun that process.
Okay.
This might be showing my hand too much, but I would say that Ames space is the highest priority.
High priority, okay.
Well, I mean, it's been said, we acquired a property there. We definitely seem to have an intent to move in that direction, so it's definitely a high priority.
Okay.
I completely agree, and I think it's easy to just say, let's build there, but I think we need to really think about all these other things to decide what we need to build there.
Right.
So while I think it's the main goal and the first thing the first large project we're going to undertake, I think as we think through all of these things, it will help us define what we want to see at Ames. So I do think it's kind of the backbone to all of this.
Right. I agree, it's a high priority.
I think it's important in that it helps us address space issues that impact the entire district.
Absolutely.
So I think it puts it up there.
Oh, can I add one thing? I would like a consideration of flex space in that addition as well, that perhaps it is used for professional development, whatever it is, depending on how much space we eventually know we can use.
Right.
So classroom space, of course, but is there any other way we can do that?
Right, so
Because
right
that
now I
would
think we're just
help
like talking about space in
the
general,
other
but not the
schools as
specific kind
well.
of space and all the
Yeah.
rest of it. Right, that'll have to be worked out.
No, I agree. Space is the high priority for this
So-
project.
All right.
I mean, one thing I would suggest though is if we're starting to talk to the village about like parking and what have you, I think we should like see where talk about it sort of as a whole, like all the schools, not just obviously Hollywood's different than Brookfield, but all the schools and how, and not just sort of like just focus on Ames, let's focus on Central, let's look at all the schools. We just talk with the village.
Right. Okay, so that's a high priority then.
Yeah.
What's the next item?
So that's the only thing we're okay, so going Clark, and then I think it's like all the schools that don't have the entry, immediate entry into an office. So that is one of the problems. I guess when we talk about this, we don't really have to go version by version.
Entry, we
That
can talk
one is-
about all the.
Yes, that is a problem area.
Yes.
The entry, some schools you go right to an office, and some schools you go right to 3 fifth grade rooms right to the office. So is that a high priority to people to secure our entrances?
Right, so maybe we should start this end today.
I'd put security as the high priority. I mean, and sort of echoing Joel, I don't want to show too much of my hand, but that for me is the highest priority for our schools. I mean, space is important, but we need to make sure the schools are secure. Having to walk down a corridor. I mean, I know in Hollywood it's fairly secure, but you walk down a corridor. I mean, how's we can walk right in? So I think we need to look at that definitely for Blythe.
I'm sorry, David, I can't hear you
Oh, I'm sorry.
over here. Can you speak up just a little bit? I really want to hear.
No. What I'm saying, security for me is the highest priority for all the schools, and I think we need to address that problem here first. I mean, I don't know. There's some space issues, but I think we need to take the security issue first, followed by space for me.
Security is one of those baselines that should be easy enough for us to achieve that we have to keep it at the top of the list.
So there might be some simple things we can do. So high priority. I would say high priority. It sounds like you've got some ideas for sort of relatively simple fixes that.
Not for me, but simple.
I think it's high priority.
What was the scale again?
High, medium, low.
I'm in agreement. Security is definitely a high priority.
I'm medium simply because I think we can look at door locking and simple things.
I'm high only because I think if you're going to do it, it needs to be the same no matter what school you visit. It doesn't seem logical to have them. Although, with buildings that are historic, I would make sure it's a sensible solution and not something that looks ridiculous on a historic piece of property.
Right. No, I agree
Some
with that.
outjet that looks crazy, I would never support. It's smart, and we talked to the principal.
Those are good points. So I think this is also high priority. I'm curious.
The next thing on the list would be talking about the Blythe Auditorium. Being able to renovate that to have more flex space.
Can I hear how that flex space is currently used? Is it for performance?
Yeah.
Solely?
We do use it weekly for band or orchestra practice. Sometimes our OTs and our PTs will bring students down there for that, but predominantly it's used for talent shows, holiday shows. It's largely an underutilized space right now, as it is. There was discussion when they came through about that possibility of leveling it off, still keeping the stage, so it could be used for performances, but also like a library media center. right now it's not like technology really equipped, so the kids can't really come down there. They don't get, good. I think the bandwidth might have been improved in the last year, though, Don. I don't know, but in the past, it wasn't a good place for that. But then possibly taking our current library and making that into classrooms. So that was something to make Blythe Park a true two-section school.
So
Do you see
moving
what I'm
that
saying?
library space into that auditorium or multifunctional space.
Maybe
Because
start.
I was gonna say, you do a lot of your all school gatherings in the gym, right?
We do, because we have a sound system there, and just a brighter space. It's more, because there's no, specific seating, we
And the
could have seating, but
windows,
kids can sit on the floor. It's usually where we do more of those types of gatherings.
Maybe start this time with Joel, if you could maybe priority on
Low.
this.
You said low.
Low. Dan?
Medium to low, with the idea towards that Blythe Park has the most square foot, available per student, plus also the potential cost of it. Would be big concerns for me there.
I would probably agree. I think it's really intriguing and a great option, but I feel that it might be down the road option. I think I don't think it'll immediately address the space issue in the district as the Ames possibility is, but I do think it's a great possibility. I just don't know if it's the first one we go to.
I think it's a low priority. I understand that point you're making, the people are making, but I think that also the other consideration I have it, not only is we have the most square footage of Blythe, but also that it is a historic building, and I'd be very reticent to go in and start chopping it up unless it were really, really, really thought through. I mean, that happened at Central. I mean, Central is not the way it should be because through the years it's been sliced and diced, and very hesitant to do that in a historic building like Blythe unless there's compelling reasons, and I don't see a compelling reason at this point in time.
It's low priority for me as well. I think it's an important item to keep on the menu for us to consider later on, but not in the immediate future.
I agree with pretty much everyone. It's low priority for me. I think it's something that's important. We need to keep it out there, but given everything else,
So that's a low?
Yeah.
Yes, I would like.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you you're in the
It's okay. It's okay. I'm a low, but I am intrigued. If there's something the library needs to make it more functional, or if it's just a matter of the two-section school. I totally understand that, but I think that's down the road. Right.
Instead of recreating building another space.
Right, just so we can add the extra section. Yeah.
Right.
So for me, that's very interesting, but a later thing for me.
So next item?
Moving on to, Central, there's a lot to talk about here, but the first one is district office space, moving district office off-site.
Okay.
Dan, do you want to start this one? We'll round robin it.
Well, I think it's something on this list that appears as potential low-hanging fruit. So I would say it's high.
I agree. I think it's, I would put very high priority. I think it's crucial space that students can be using. I think it's really inaccessible for the public to get to the district office, especially during a school day if you want to try to park on the street. I think it's while it's nice to be on a campus, it's only the one campus. To me, I think putting the district office somewhere in the town of Riverside, not off where it's inaccessible to people, but somewhere centrally located where administrators can get to where they need, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'm full support of it.
Okay. I'm a medium. I think that we do need extra space at Central. That's an obvious place to get it. At the same time, we just moved the district office there 4 years ago. It costs money every time we move something, and we got to renovate it, and we got to move things here. So I wouldn't want to. It's not a free option just to move offices around and all that. So I would say if we find appropriate space, that we should keep that option open. So I'd say medium priority. I wouldn't say this is the first thing we have to do on the list. So.
I think it's one of those options that if we're talking about needing additional classroom space, I think it should be high on the list.
I'd say it's a medium. I think you need that space. But sort of echo what you said, Jeff. It's like if we're gonna move it every time. We moved them 4 years ago.
And what are we going to do with that property? Are we going to, like, as you mentioned, could we put offices there? And then are we just sort of making the problem worse? I mean, so I'm just sort of want to, I mean, I think it's important, but I don't consider it that high of a priority. So more
Just a background question. I don't know if anyone in this room has the answer. So I know the district office moved back here 4 years ago. Prior it was at Monte Cristi in North Riverside for 2 years?
Oh, no.
Years? Oh, it was for years over there. Okay.
I honestly don't know.
At least since 2009.
I feel like it wasn't at
Institutional
Monte
knowledge.
Cristi. But
I know. I don't know.
Yeah, you should
I
know,
know
Bill.
it was at least 2, but it wasn't.
I was gonna say it was only like
I'd say
2.
more
It was
than 2.
I was thinking 3.
2 or 3. And then it was where it is now.
Yes.
Okay, so it was there,
So
and then it moved
from
off site
where
for a
it
few
is
years. So it's not like it's
there.
jumped all over, you know, the space. It's gone to 2 spaces. So I think if we do talk about this, it would be a very deliberate, you know, change. But
For
Sherry.
me, I'm in between medium and high. I would like that space, even to move some kind of, small groups there to do things. It's such an easy thing to do. I like having the district office where people can find it. I don't want it in a different town. It needs to be accessible. You guys have to be able to reach the buildings in a manner where you can get to kids. I mean, you can't be off far away. So I would be interested in definitely close, but I would like the space. Yeah.
Joel?
I'm medium because I'm concerned about moving where to put technology and special ed, because it seems like they're more appropriately located on a campus.
What do you think?
I do see the advantage of getting that space for additional smaller spaces in Central. Just our space issues.
So we have 4 mediums, 2 highs, 1 medium high. So this is sort of like a medium high-ish kind of thing. Not the top priority, but definitely something to pursue. It sounds like. Next on the list.
The landmark report. That was June 24th, 2008.
Oh,
When
okay.
it moved.
Thank you.
It is about
The next.
That was the report.
Okay.
I don't remember being that long. The next one is for Central, and it's the renovating and adding 2 small additions as part of a phased expansion plan at Central. So I think we kind of have to talk about, the first one is infilling the courtyard to create a flexible space and cafeteria. I think that would be the first phase of that. So, it's me.
You're
I
up,
forgot.
yeah.
I was
Yes.
thinking to you. Depending on the cost of this plan, I think it's a intriguing option. I think the benefit of getting Central out of Hauser's cafeteria is enormous. I think for scheduling for both schools, I would think. Again, I have no idea how much infilling a courtyard would be, but I think of all the other things that we're talking about at Central, outside of moving the district office, that would be. So I guess I'm going to go with a medium, even though it doesn't really feel like it applies. I don't know.
I agree. I think it's a very intriguing idea. I think it could be a really cool space. You have an atrium. It could be like really neat. But relative to all the other stuff we have on the list, I would put that as sort of a medium low. This is sort of something we can do once we've sort of banged out the other stuff that is really higher priority. So I'm a medium low on that one, I guess.
I look at this project right here, and as intriguing as it can be, I look at this and I think that's probably got a high price tag on it, a really high price tag. And I'd like us to vet other solutions before we did this. So I would put this low to medium.
Okay.
And there are parts of this that I like. I mean, I like the idea, the fact that we're addressing the ADA issues that we have here. And like the addition of the small addition in the back of the building. I mean, the thing that I'm sort of hesitant on is like a green roof. I mean, while that's intriguing, I think that's a cool idea. I think that's something we need right now. And then also the cafeteria. I mean, it's like it's the only elementary school that has a cafeteria. Do we need? I mean, I know it's
shared with
right.
Hauser.
They share. Right.
That's the problem.
Right. So for me, it would be a low priority. But I guess, if I can say that, but I mean, like the ADA concerns are important that I think we need to address. So I don't know if like maybe a medium to low, just because there are certain aspects of it that I think need to be addressed, but not everything.
Not the most pressing.
For me, the cafeteria issue seems to be a huge crux for Hauser and Central to function. They have very variety. Some people eat at 10 a.m., some people eat at 1 or 12. It's a ridiculous way to move children around. So it seems expensive. I would need to see how much that costs, but that is very intriguing to me, that atrium kind of feel. Over all the other pieces, that's the most intriguing one for me. So I think I will say medium to low. It's awesome. I would need to see a lot of detail first.
Medium, because of the opportunities to fix the security and the ADA.
That's why I was kind of just talking about the courtyard at first, and because I think these are all very different. Because we've already kind of talked about the security, you know.
I'm rolling together, but sorry.
Well, and I'm in agreement with Sherry. I mean, having kids who've told me their lunch times were like 10:30 in the morning. What? Seriously? That aspect of having this, each school having their own separate cafeteria is definitely an interesting idea, and it seems to be a very creative idea of a solution. I do wonder about how expensive that creativity is, and it's something that would. It's something that would be, a big plan, something that we would have to consider probably at some point down the road. I'm going to say that's a medium for fear that if I say it's a low, that we never get back to it.
Okay. So we have 3 mediums and 4 medium lows. So that's sort of a medium lowish.
Yeah, I think. I think as we talk about this, like if we keep ranking the district office medium, this like at some point we have to find space at Central. You know what I mean? Or wherever, like wherever.
Would
we're
this rank
looking.
lower than the district office? The district office was medium high.
Right.
I think,
Right.
So,
Okay, so you're gonna track this.
He's keeping track.
Just keeping score. Just to talk more specifically about like other parts of this plan, like if we were gonna, we already kind of talked about the office location. We talked about ADA, the green roof.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll start on that one. I'm very low on that. I just don't think it's I think we need more space, outdoor space. I just don't think this is a feasible way to get it. So for me, it's intriguing and exciting, but I would put a very low priority on it.
I agree. I like green roofs. I had one for a while. They're kind of a hassle to maintain, but I like the idea. But I think this is sort of probably not our first priority. So I'd put it as a low as well.
So what do you going down to a bullet point on that?
No, I think they're two very different things. I mean, I think that kind of goes into the second problem area of green space that's going below. I just wanted to make sure we talk about that.
Identify this particular idea.
Yes, that particular idea, because
I got you.
We're talking about 5 different bullet points that are completely different.
Yeah,
so I
put it
just
low.
want to get like a sense for Carrie to say like, do we all think that's a high priority, yes or no?
It sounds fantastic, but I think we have other priorities. But that's low for me.
I mean, that's low for me, given everything else that we're facing.
Sure.
I'm actually a medium on that. I worry how much it costs.
Which it costs a lot.
Even beyond the gymnasium, I'd almost rather see a bump out of classrooms and then use the roof. So maybe there's some creativity there. That's my opinion. New science wing, whatever. New regular classrooms just to move the giant 6, 7, 8 classes that we have lately.
Joel?
Whatever, makerspace, yeah. Awesome, Meryl.
As much as I like to be green, I have to say low just due to costs, and I think there's better ways to spend time on maintenance, because it would be a long-term maintenance issue.
So you're low, and Dan?
It's mostly been said. I would say it's low.
Low. Okay, so that one's a low.
So we're going to move on to the Hauser Auditorium. There's 2 solutions. I don't know. I think we can just talk about them at the same time, so we don't have to keep round robin. Install operable partitions in the back of the auditorium, or renovate the auditorium into a multi-use space.
I say low. I don't see that as a big priority. I mean, the Hauser Auditorium, I've never seen it as a bigger problem, so I would not prioritize this one at all.
while I think it'd be really nice to be able to do full assemblies of Hauser, I don't necessarily attach that as a high priority, so I'm going to put that low.
So are we talking both, just option one right now?
You can talk about whichever one you.
Yeah, I mean, of the two, I'd put Hauser, the first option is low, and probably the second option is medium for me.
So you would rather do a full renovation as opposed to a partition?
Yeah.
I think I'm low on this one. It seems ambitious for what we get out of it.
I'm low as well. It's adequately used now, even though it is tight when we have events.
I was going to say, it would be a very high priority to me some nights with school performances. When you can't get a seat. Usually, though, if you wait for one grade to finish, then things start to. But yeah, I'm in agreement. I would say this is a low priority.
Yeah, I would say the same. I know that it would be great to have all school, to be able to gather the whole school for community building, but in terms of what we emergent needs, I don't think this is one of them.
I'm struck by the degree of consensus. We're all kind of agree on everything. So, are we thinking like as a group think, or what is it? Just all?
I think it's obvious. I don't know.
All right, so.
All right,
So that's low. That's a low.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the next one is. Sorry.
Moving to Hollywood or something else.
This is like displacing parking at Hollywood.
Okay.
We already talked about the office, or I feel like when we talk about the office and front entries, we've already discussed that. So
Yeah.
like space.
Fine.
Am I missing anything here? Building needs to just displacing parking and creating a small addition at Hollywood. That's where we're at. Sorry.
Yeah.
Displacing parking.
Are they both together, or
I
can you
think-
displace parking, period?
I
And
think
not do
they're
the bump out
together.
until later, or do they have to be done together? I mean, it's a
maybe we
cost
can talk
issue.
about displacing parking at all locations.
Right.
And I
as
need
one.
to hear from.
Well, I would think
Yeah.
that if we displace parking, we should do the bump out. I mean, I think they're sort of hand in hand. I mean,
Yeah.
we can't do the
Well,
addition
unless
without
you-
displacing parking.
Unless you're using it as outdoor space.
Right.
True.
You know.
What is the purpose of the bump out exactly? I don't quite understand.
I haven't
what
heard that yet.
To add the space for the specials,
The specials?
and also
Okay.
the psychologist and the occupational therapist, because they're on the stage right now.
Ah, okay.
I believe.
That's what I think she said, yeah.
Rich,
Whose
that's
turn is it?
You're up here.
So the parking, that's a similar problem to Ames, right? Where the kids are playing amongst all the parked cars. I think that's a higher priority for me to solve that problem. So as it relates to that and the bump out, I put this a higher priority.
So how would you want to break these down into two separate items, and how would you
I sort of feel like it's tied together.
they're tied together?
I do.
So basically, you're saying like if there's a way that we can displace parking, then it opens up avenues
Okay.
for
That's right.
other things.
So contingent upon
So this
that.
topic, what priority would you give this whole category then?
I'd give this category here, Hollywood Solution 1, a higher priority.
A high priority.
Yes.
This whole topic. Okay.
Yep.
I would concur with Rich. I would agree this is a high priority. I mean, I think we need to first of all make sure that we can displace the parking, but that definitely gives us options. So I put them both together as a high priority.
If we can't displace the parking, it's sort of a non-starter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's moot. Yeah, I agree with that. For me, I'm medium to high, only because the cost is fairly unknown about what kind of bump out what that means. For me, it's a little foggy about
That's why I almost
how
feel
big
like
that
we should
is.
be talking about it in the context of what you're saying, like problem area.
But for me,
parking.
high would, part of that would be talk to Brookfield, see if that parking can be displaced. I think that's high for me. If that's an easy solution, then we can talk other things. But for me, it's contingent upon that.
It's your medium.
Yeah.
But to get to Linda's point, though, I think it's a space issue too. So I mean, if we're going back to, I mean, for me, it's a space issue. Yeah, so it's a high priority.
I'm going to say high for a couple reasons. I think the political address issue with regards to Brookfield can be handled, I hesitate to say better, but I will. And even though Hollywood has a lot of space per student, it working off the stage seems a bit much. And the specials should have priority.
It sounds like Joe is volunteering for this project.
He wants to talk.
That's what I heard.
I'll walk with over there with my fellow
All right, so-
Brookfield resident.
That's a high. then.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Thank you.
Dan?
Having a student at RB as well and seeing the recent issues with parking in Brookfield, I guess I'm kind of down on the idea that the parking constraint problem could be solved in an easy fashion, and possibly it can be. I guess, though, that I do have serious doubts about that. So to me, it is a medium.
So for me, I think of it as the problem of, I know if we can move the cars to have the space, we can create either outdoor space or bump out. So for me, I'm thinking of it as just the parking and traffic issues. I would consider that a very high priority. I certainly, though, don't feel that it's a very solvable issue. So while I think it's a high priority, I don't feel like it's feasible.
Okay. High priority, but you think...
And I'm talking about across the district. So if we're looking at all the schools, there's a parking issue at all the schools. So
Certainly, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how you would rank that in your ranking.
Yeah, you said high, so I'll put you as high. Is that what you want me to put you?
Right, but I'm just talking about parking. I'm not talking about specifically additions on any of this.
Well, because we have the same play issue at Central with children playing with cars in a near vicinity and no green space really to play
They play in the parking lot in all the schools, I think.
Yeah,
Yes,
in my opinion, parking is kind of its own.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say.
I agree
that's
with
what
you.
I'm talking about. The
And
bump
Ames
out,
as well.
Creating more space at Hollywood, I think, is also very important. I think there's no space, so I think adding space is a high
Right.
priority.
I agree with what people have said. I think it would be desirable if we could eliminate a lot of our parking spaces, replace it with green space, possibly have an addition. I think that would be great. I don't know just how easy it's going to be without land to do it on. And so I would put this as a medium priority, and I'll put this, so the overall topic looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 highs, 3 mediums. It's a medium high topic.
Okay.
Very convoluted way.
Do you have a better idea?
No, I don't.
It's fine.
All right, so then we're out of the parity section. So yay. We're moving on to outdoor green space improvements at each facility. I don't know if in this conversation we talk about it by school or do we talk about it as a problem in general? What's the best?
Green space, you're saying, is a problem?
I guess we have to talk. I mean, certain campuses would have different.
Kind of related to parking in a way.
It's tough, but in general, could I summarize, see if you guys agree with this? If property comes available in the vicinity of a house, I think it's something we can look at, because that's a lot of what the recommendations are dependent on is additional land.
Opportunistically, basically.
Yes, it's an opportunistic thing. I'm not committing to buying anyone's house.
I think
Next day. No.
I think Blythe is the only one that really doesn't.
No, Blythe has.
Right. So
Blythe
I
has
think
correct.
I think we can all agree that Blythe is good with green space. We can maybe talk about the other schools.
Right.
So do we want to go around school by school, or what do you want me to do?
What do you
I think
recommend?
Joel is right. I mean, really, the recommendations by Carrie are you really solve this by adjacent properties.
Yeah.
Possible.
But there's a few specific things in here, like at the Hauser Central campus, the idea of synthetic turf. I mean, that is something
And
we probably need to.
Well, why don't we talk about
We can
specific
throw
things that are
that
sort
in.
of the higher,
Can I suggest that we rank, I'll say high for opportunistic purchase of land.
Yeah.
sounds good to me, yeah. Everyone's okay with opportunistic purchase, sort of high priority, if it's sort of the right price,
If
the
it's
right time.
reasonable
right?
and makes sense.
It's available and reasonable.
Circumstances
I'm
are.
sure we're gonna get a lot of these opportunities.
Should be considered.
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious we're committed. If we need to buy property, we have shown that we can do that, so.
All right. I guess my only concern with that is sort of because we're talking about possibly if we were talking about like opportunistic purposes of buying property next door. I mean, I'm okay with that, and I consider that, but I don't consider that necessarily I'm just uncomfortable talking about it because people who live in the source schools, well, if they're thinking about this, maybe we can approach the village, or we can approach the school and say, oh, well, we'll sell you our house for X or something like that. And so I'm just a little concerned that there might be some opportunistic, how should I say this?
Speculation?
Speculation, yes, thank you.
I think it's dependent on appraised value and
usual. Right, no.
That's right.
Right.
If we don't like the price and it's ridiculous, I mean, I would never pay for
Right,
that.
purchased one house in I don't know how many decades, so I don't think it's
I'm
a
just-
risk
I'm-
that
right.
might be going on a spending spree buying real estate.
Yeah, at a market value.
Right.
Okay, so then, going through things, it's
Which
really
one are
what
you
we're talking
moving to?
about. We've already talked about basically, when we talk about green space, we're talking about parking issues, which we've already talked about. We're talking about getting property, and then we're talking about at Central in Hauser, the possibility of synthetic turf replacing the green T-ball field.
Who did we start with this time? Is it you? Is it you the person?
Yeah, my turn. I guess in regards to the turf, I mean, I think that's, I'd be interested to know the cost. I mean, if the cost came in sort of what I consider reasonable, which I don't have anything to base it on, so, but if it came in what I thought, what was a reasonable price, I'd probably put it as high, but depending on the cost, it's, I mean, conceptually, it's probably a medium for me, but a lot depends on the cost.
So you put it as a medium priority?
Right.
Okay.
For me, it's a low because I have concerns about the safety regarding children's health and the people that use it and the staff. I'm not convinced that it's safe at this point.
Joel?
Low, but I'd support looking at other drainage solutions.
I'm in complete agreement with that statement. Low due to cost, due to potential health issues, but then also an agreement that drainage issues could be looked into. Options, I should say, not issues.
I'm slightly intrigued by the idea. I think it's a huge chunk of land that is completely underutilized. I mean, Hauser uses it for PE, but half the time they can't because it rained or it's wet or, so I definitely think it's a piece of land that I want to look at.
You're at medium or high?
I mean, I don't know how to rank. See, I'm very hard.
Sounds like you're medium.
I can't really do these like hungry, discrete rankings. I'm like, I want to be on a continuum.
Are you okay with us calling that medium?
Sure, but I would call the space high, but maybe the turf
One
medium.
number here.
I am
Medium
intrigued
high
by
then?
what Joel said about other drainage possibilities. I'd like to hear more about that.
No, I agree with that. I'd rank this as a low. I share Sherry's. I don't know if it's a health risk or not.
Yeah, I
but
don't
it's
know.
very much
I'm not
uncertain. And
convinced
also,
yet.
when we talk about green space, to me, green space means green space.
Means
it means
green.
gardens, it means grass. It doesn't mean turf and rubber.
I don't know.
and-
To me, it means outdoor space.
Yeah, I don't see it. That's where I. So,
I would
to
like
me,
more
I'd be
natural
very much,
experience, personally,
Opposed to
because
this.
this is Riverside.
Just on principle.
I'd like to see that space better utilized. I mean, it's a bathtub basically. The thing floods all the time and it's unusable. So when we talk about green space, that feels like low-hanging fruit to me. That we need to figure out how to use that more effectively.
So I think Joel's idea of better drainage, I mean, that sounds like an excellent sort of possible thing to pursue is maybe get better drainage if
I
that's.
want to read Carrie's mind right now.
So would you put this as what do you say, Richard?
I'm going to put it high priority.
High, okay, the one high. So this first one, we have real disagreements here. So we have 4 lows, 2 mediums.
But it sounds like we all have like a pretty good feeling that it's underutilized space that we would let. I think some
No
of the
more
rankings are
sports.
based on.
Just kidding.
No, I think the rankings are being skewed by the idea of turf versus another option. So
Right.
why don't we do them again with turf and then do
But we're talking about expanding intramurals at Hauser.
Right.
You
Right.
need outdoor space to do that. You have to have usable outdoor space.
I guess what I'm trying to say, would anybody change their ranking if we weren't just talking about turf? If we were talking about looking at that land and making that land more usable? Would your ranking change?
Yes.
That's
To what?
Medium to medium high.
So you
was a
what were
low.
you before low? Okay.
and I would definitely be high on that. I know tell you
You're
why.
high.
Yes, I've moved. If we're just talking about the space and not talking about the turf part of the space.
Okay. Any other changes? So we're basically, this is a very split one. The only one we had were split. So we have 3 lows, 2 highs, 1 medium high, and 1 medium. So the same medium, I guess.
Medium.
Medium, yeah. Medium with high variance.
So we don't know what it is.
Need a coefficient.
Student deviation is 1.
I don't know where I'm at, I'm sorry. Hollywood. Same thing, talking about adjacent property, talking about parking. Okay, so now we're just onto the 2 bullet points. Teacher collaboration space. Each building in the district is in need of teacher collaboration space.
I think Sherry, you're up on that one.
I think it's high. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how. You can come to my house. Like, come across the street. Just kidding.
Don't say that,
They're
Sherry.
gonna
Better idea of what that means, though.
Only because I
What
live
does that mean
next door.
operationally?
Yeah.
Operationally means flexible space.
Right. Okay.
And what does that mean operationally?
Means
What
we
is
need more space each building.
that? Adding additions to each building.
That's correct.
Oh, in addition. So I was
Lining
confused.
it someplace by solving another problem.
Okay.
So those things. So if you were to renovate the auditorium at Blythe, that could be that space as well. If you were to renovate the auditorium at Hauser, it could be that space.
So is this a separate? Is this a separate category? Is it have we somehow already covered it in a
I
way
don't know.
implicitly with the other?
Or it only happens when some of those bigger things
Yeah.
happen.
Correct. Like you could look at the addition at Ames and say, okay, well, we need some space that can be flexible for these other types of uses.
Right. That would be the first place I would
I was
look.
the other thing I see is we talk about like a professional development space, so large groups of teachers to meet together because they're getting training on the new reading curriculum, let's say. But then there's also I have 40 minutes available and I want to meet with my coworkers to plan today within the day. And even that is, so it's sort of that example you used, like even when you go to Ames and you want to meet in the conference room, you can't meet in the conference room because 3 other things are waiting to meet in the conference room. So it's that there can be collaboration space that I think is small but available. And then there's sort of that being able to gather a larger amount of staff together.
And I think when we're looking at this, it's not looking at like the actual, what plans are we making to do this, it's the idea,
It's
right?
the problem. This is
It's
a
the
problem,
problem of it.
certainly.
Is this something that we feel is important? So as we're solving the problems for the district, will this be part of our conversation?
Just keep it in mind, basically.
Yeah, so it's not like, will we build an addition at every school to
Okay.
We're talking about the idea. Is teacher collaboration space important to you as a...
So it's more like how the space should be used,
Yeah.
and that's sort of almost like a user. How do users like?
Right, which
wanna
would
design
then,
it? It's
as
almost
we've
like-
already
it's almost
decided,
like not
Ames is
even-
important,
Right.
but, when you're designing Ames, are we designing teacher collaboration spaces because the board...
So in a way, it almost goes without saying that we want to use effective use of space and good spaces. It's almost like a redundant. So we're not really adding anything by saying it's high or low or anything like that.
No,
It's like,
well, I
almost
think...
something like
I think it's semi-obvious.
case dependent, right? It's case dependent, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
I think
One
it's-
example, like if that was a high priority to create that kind of space, and the only option for creating that kind of flexible space would be to look at relocating the district office to create that space. We're looking at an alternative location for flexible space. Like those are the kinds of things where if we decide not to do that, but that's the only way to get the flexible space, then you might throw that back on the table if that concept is a high priority.
Isn't priority, right?
So just thinking through the lens of collaboration.
So who's up next? Is it? Are you sure?
Yeah, I think it's high. I'd like to look at Ames since it's kind of a blank slate. I know we don't know the footprint that we're going to get, but that would be my first choice. And then to kind of be creative after that would be, so for me, I'm high for that, but if it involves giant additions everywhere, I'm going to need a serious look at cost.
I have to nuance it by saying it's high in terms of incorporating it into whatever proposed plan we have.
Yeah.
As an independent entity, low.
So you want to say
It's I can medium, that's fine.
You're good at getting people to level they're at.
I definitely consider it high. And one of the things that was mentioned here, I think, in the report, and talking about in conjunction with potential move of district offices, if we could find additional space for that there. I think that's definitely something that would be very interesting and potentially very beneficial.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I'm a medium. I think that it's sort of going to be case by case. I like the idea, I like the concept. I mean, and I think we should definitely keep that in mind in all of our discussions and all of our planning. I'm not clear what exactly it means in all cases,
Right.
though. So I'd say.
I mean, and I think
I look at it as breakout space while class is in session. You know, when we all walk through schools, we see small groups, sitting on the floor in the hallway. So when it's listed in this way, I sort of look at it as additional small breakout rooms, and that's a higher priority for me.
So you could use it for
Yeah.
like whoever.
Multi-use.
Yeah, I agree with that.
No, it's a high priority for me.
So here we have 1, 2, 3.
I like your context, Rich.
5 highs,
Good.
2 mediums. This is high to medium sort of project.
the last one, full day kindergarten. So how do we want to talk about this concept in terms of, because we were talking about it right now in terms of facilities, correct?
How much space do we need for all the kindergarten?
One at Ames.
So 1 additional classroom at Ames and 1 at Central. So it's not really like, it's not a huge amount of new space that we would need for all the kindergarten. If we're talking about an Ames addition, we would have that anyway. And if we move the district office, for example, we'd open up a room there. So it's not, the space consideration doesn't seem like it's overwhelming.
To accommodate your current.
To accommodate, right. 8 sections. So how do you want to talk about this then? So,
Who's asking you?
Who's next?
that would be Joel.
I thought it was you.
Jeff assigns priorities.
I didn't think he's going first.
So yeah,
I'm low on this because of where it sits in our strategic plan. I think there's more important things in our strategic plan than addressing full-day kindergarten.
I would say medium to low, given that the amount of discussion and the amount of considerations that would go into this topic, I think are much more than just 2 rooms.
yeah. I'm going to go the opposite here because I do think as we're looking at facilities, this being said, I think before we would make a decision if we're going to move the full-day kindergarten or not, it would be a curriculum decision, instructional. Is this what's best for our students? So I don't know that. I don't have that data, so I would think if we would want to base it on that. But for facilities-wise, as we're looking at spaces, I want to keep this in the conversation. So for me, it's a high.
I would say it's a low. I would say that does not seem like a facility issue at all, because if we're talking about an Ames build out, we're going to get space there. If we need to get space at Central because we decide we want to do kindergarten for the reasons that you're mentioning, that people are mentioning, then we can get space in the district. We make that a higher priority and move to this office. And so I think that getting that space, if we need it, it's not hard. So I think this is a low priority.
But the problem is we keep saying this district office space for so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're like, well, we could get that space for that. We can get that space for that.
We have to
can get that space
prioritize
for that.
the things we want to do with that space. Right? That
Right.
space is not, I don't think we need to build out a special room at Central just to do only kindergarten.
No. But I think as we're going through this facility process, I think it's something we need to be thinking about.
For the reasons that Joel mentioned, it's a lower priority for me.
Yeah, it's a low priority for me as well.
So this we have.
You forgot me again.
You didn't even get there. It's like-
Because you moved my seat this year. For me, it's actually an academic issue. For a district like ours of high achieving students, I haven't read that the research guarantees sustained academic growth for all-day kindergarten, and I would really want to look at that and the reasons why we want it, other than I need somewhere for my child to go, which is also an important need. I understand that, but with the space issues we have, I want to make sure it's academically appropriate. So I'm a low.
So low. Okay. So we have 5 lows, 1 medium low, and 1 high. So I would say that's a low, basically. So I think is that
Variant.
with an outlier.
There's one thing that we kind of passed over I'd like to revisit, and this was on the list for Central, in talking about the point where it discusses the drop-off.
Oh yeah, let me see that.
page is that on?
Okay, so I'm on page 7 where it mentions it. Is there another place?
It's by the green space. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, you run the show right now, because I can't find it.
Well, I wasn't on the committee, but,
Oh, yeah.
okay. Well, it says, this talks about the most impactful site is Woodside Road, being one of the most traversed roads in the community. Main location for pickup and drop off of more than 1,000 students. And it's something, having navigated that river of cars many a morning, it's something I definitely have seen and feel and experienced it as a safety issue as well as a convenience issue. I think, that talks about the recommendations going to adjacent houses. Sure, I definitely I could see how that could help. At the same time, I don't know if that's the right place to discuss it, but I think there are other options here for this points of discussion, and it's something that I just would like to bring up and have it discussed as well.
Do you want to get people's priorities on that?
Sure.
Okay.
That's my
So basically investigating drop-offs at Central.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who is the person? Were you?
I'll start. So I kind of, when we were talking about moving cars and all that, I kind of feel like that is...
As part of parking sort of thing.
Yeah, like, I think traffic around all of the schools is a problem, and I think it's a high priority. I'm not, again, it's one of those things I just don't know how feasible any changes are, but...
I think it's definitely a problem. It's a problem with many of our schools. I agree it's not obvious. The problem is the cars. It's not like, we're not going to build a 6-lane highway there, so it's not something that's going to be easily solved, so I would say medium priority, I think.
I don't think we really know what the solutions could be unless you're willing to commit to a traffic study that can look at all the schools and look at different lane configurations and the like. So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you talk about the traffic study, does anyone know the results of our village traffic study with regard to the schools and the streets adjacent to them?
It wasn't super clear.
Was that clear?
I think it was some slower traffic. It was fixing the traffic light.
That's a really good point about the study.
It was continuing to keep the supervision that we have before and after school to try to regulate things through just manpower.
Did the school do a traffic study a few years ago?
It did a few years ago, and I don't know what the results were, and I'd like the opportunity to try and find that.
I agree with Rich. I'd like to see that.
I think we should look a little bit deeper into that, but for that reason, I would put it high. I'd put it high just to see what we have and if it's worth checking into it and add a traffic study.
Traffic is an issue pretty much at all our schools. It's a high issue for me. I'm not a traffic person, so I don't know what the solution is. I, for some reason, would think we don't have much solutions to our problems, but I'd be interested to know what we can do, but it's definitely a high priority.
I think it's a high priority to investigate. I don't know about the purchase of property for that. I'm not sure that's a solution. I think if I had my way, I would really encourage our residents to really think about mobilization, children walking to school in safe groups. I know it's not always possible if they're driving to work, but that was still something that could alleviate some of that if we really mobilize ourselves into that drop-off moment, creating safe places for the kids to walk together, which I know they do in some of the first district communities. They have some groups that walk together, and it's amazing. They form a community, and they have it growing up with them. And it's not just about the cars; it's also about the people and why we're doing it.
Right.
So.
I'm a medium simply because I think we need to revisit that study and see if we implemented all the recommendations that were in it in the first place.
Okay.
I'm a high, and that it sounds like there are issues, there are acknowledged issues with traffic and drop-offs around all our schools. If we've studied this in the past, definitely, I think that's an obvious thing to go back to see if we've implemented all the recommendations. Just, again, going back to my own personal experience, it just seems like there's got to be a better way.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have 5 highs, 2 mediums. This is a high priority. So Are there any other things we've missed here in this list, or did anyone leave anything out, or?
Or do any of you feel that there's something that we didn't even broach? Like, you know what I mean, as a committee, that what we brought to you guys, is there something that you feel was, you know, that you'd like to talk about? See, for me, the way I'm looking at this is, of course, we're not going to be able to fix all these problems all at once, but as we go slowly, I think it'll kind of be a chain of, we do this, and where does everything fall? And that, so I think we need to think of this in a very long-term.
Right.
That is definitely the concept of the long-term plan, and marrying it with other items, operations and maintenance items, to get that economy of scale and to make sense of the next 5 years, and to have a long plan for what you're doing 2018, 2019, 2020, and so forth, and having a long look at that so that you can physically plan for that.
There's one sort of minor topic that I think that is slightly related, which has to do with our landscaping and our landscape architecture and all that. It's like a lot of the trees seem to me like they're planted kind of randomly. There's a number of trees on our campuses that, like, there's the Bradford pear right outside the district office. There's one right outside of Ames. They're planted right next to the building. They're very weak wooded. They're invasive species. They should not be there. They shouldn't be there at all. So there's a number of things, like there's the hackberry that's out in front of Hauser. So I think the landscape architecture plan, I'm not saying this is a huge priority, but I think that's something that, I'm not sure you're the right person to do it, but I think it's something that maybe should be given. We had that tree growing next to the Blythe, that huge burrow, and someone's got to be looking at the landscape architecture side of things for the buildings. So I think that's something that, in my view, needs to be looked at.
I would incorporate that with looking at
maintenance
green
and all
space.
that. Right, green space, yeah.
I think that's a maintenance issue first.
Right.
And I think that's something we can tackle in R&M rather than attach it to this project.
It's maintenance, but it's also, I think, design. There's an element of design there, like what kind of trees we plant, where maybe the kids get involved, and where we plant them, and that kind of thing.
Well, we can bring in some of the local groups, and we do have an arborist in the village that we can consult, and now that our village is considered a major presence in that world.
The trees add a lot to the campuses, and I think, if we don't maintain them and be careful about planting, we don't have that. So if I can just summarize, then go through the list, just make sure we got these right, and probably just carry. So the Ames addition, possible Ames addition was a high priority. The entryway security was a high priority. So if I say something that people disagree with, tell me. The Blythe Auditorium was a low priority. Moving the district office to another site was a medium-high priority. The cafeteria in the courtyard at Central was a medium-low priority. The green roof was a low priority. The Hauser Auditorium changes were a low priority. The possible parking reconfiguration and build out at Hollywood was a medium-high priority. Opportunistic purchases of land were a high priority. Synthetic turf was a medium.
With a lot of variance.
Yes, medium, lower, medium, I guess, with a lot of variance.
Teacher collaboration space.
Teacher collaboration space was a high priority, and they're high to medium high. And kindergarten was a low priority.
In terms of facilities.
In terms of facilities.
I see Bob writing over there.
In terms of facilities,
So,
exactly.
I want to make sure it's very clear that
Everything
this
is for the
conversation of
facility.
full-day kindergarten is in the context of the facility plan.
And central drop-off was a high priority. So is everyone, did we get everything? Is that accurate then?
Because you know what the headline will be tomorrow.
Okay, so then the next item, is there anything else on this topic?
Well, I guess I have a question. So are you now going to come back to us with sort of more detailed plans for, what are the next steps here?
The next question I have is about community outreach.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whether we go from here, whether you wanted this piece compiled prior to that, or we're going to wait to compile it in its entirety after we agree to community outreach.
What do people think?
I think that the piece gets compiled prior to community outreach because that gives us really something tangible to show to people.
As a tentative set of priorities.
Tangible solutions.
Yeah, it's a little vague right now.
But I guess too, and I agree with you, Rich. I guess my question is, what do we ever focus on? Do we ever do all of them, even our low ones, or do we just do the mediums, medium highs?
Well, it's the same way that David Sellers would give us financial priorities with regard to those projects, and we would tackle the high priority first because it was a need, it was a safety need or something else. I think that's my opinion on how we should proceed, start with those that are high.
Should it be like medium to medium high?
Say, yeah, the low stuff.
Medium high to high is
right.
what I'm saying.
Say that, yeah, the stuff that we think is, medium or medium to high, maybe.
Right, maybe.
They can all be included in the report.
Right, absolutely, they should be.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I was going to say, while if we compile the report first, I also want to make sure that we're hearing what the community has to say. I almost feel like you compile the report after you talk to the community because there could be some really great ideas out there that we haven't even discussed at this table or in the committee.
Are we talking about, though, like giving the, if we have focus groups or something like that, giving them the report that you've given us? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what we're talking about? So they have something to talk about, basically.
There's many ways you could do it. That's one. That's for certain be one way, or you could present it like linear and then have breakout groups for each school to talk about the priorities of those topics and to talk about any other solutions that they might want to investigate.
I want community involvement, but I guess my concern is that, my concern is I have multiple concerns. Actually two primary concerns. My first concern is that people at Ames are going to want all those priorities as high. People at Hollywood are only going to want those issues as high. And then also I'm concerned that we might be getting some things that are sort of really one-off. I remember when I first moved to Riverside, one thing I sat through like a village plan when they were talking about village plan. Somebody talked about a zip line from like going across Swan Pond. Well, that was a cool idea, but I think we need to provide the direction, come up with what we think is best for the district and say, okay, community, here's what we have prioritized as important. What is your input on that? And then obviously there can be some variations from that, but I think sort of going along with Rich's point, I think we need to have and we go with them with a better understanding. Well, this is what it's going to cost, this is what it's going to involve, and this is these are all the, what it's going to take to do something like that.
And I would like it tied to the strategic plan because there were conversations in that strategic plan facilities committee that were very specific with regards to focus, and we maybe should revisit to make sure it aligns as much as it can. I think it does from what I see, but I don't think that's because that was the community that we invited to participate.
I think I'm thinking of it a little bit differently, and I could be off here. I'm thinking it more of like the same way we got feedback from students and teachers and staff. I want the community to be able to have a chance to
just weigh in.
It doesn't mean that everything. Because clearly everything the students said were not like, oh, you wanted that, we're going to give you that. I think this is a lot of taxpayer money that could possibly be spent, and I personally would rather err on the side of giving opportunity. It doesn't mean we can't have a report because a report can be amended. So for me, I want to make sure that people.
More open-ended. You want things to be more open-ended, basically, in the focus group.
You can present it in this, and then as the conversation organically happens, people can bring things up. I just don't want to be so tied to just the rankings we just did on this board.
What do you think,
Are you
Joel?
suggesting like a town hall or something where Carrie comes and presents it and it's open for comments and questions? At this stage of it?
I guess so. I'd also think a survey. I think there's a lot of people who don't want to come to a town hall, so I think some sort of just like open, both. I would do both. I would do a facilities night, and then I would do a survey for people who don't want to go spend the night.
Initially, we talked about doing focus groups at each school for the families that live in each area. Does that make sense? A survey and focus groups, or?
I think the focus groups can start with town hall, and they break off into focus groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then give the focus groups a report? Is that what we're saying?
Well, what, Martha, do you have a recommendation on this?
Well, actually, I'm looking more at Carrie, who's done this kind of work in different districts, and if you have a recommendation for us.
Well, it's dependent upon the community, so it's different in every community. There's certainly some pros to
inviting a survey, just a kind of open-ended survey for any ideas that would like to be considered. I think that that's certainly feasible to do, and I've worked in many districts that have done that, and that's all that they've done, and then compiled the report, and then once decisions have been prioritized and made and moving in a direction, then involve the community again, and that's worked.
So starting with a sort of detailed survey to the entire
Right.
community.
So it's more like 3 questions, and they're allowed to incorporate any ideas that they have and then document it, and then that gets integrated into the report.
I mean, clearly this project tonight was brought out of committee.
Yeah.
Presented in an open meeting that's, the video is going to be posted. I mean, I think that's a very important first step. And there's the opportunity for people to join these meetings and to make public comment. I think probably, Linda, what you're suggesting is something beyond that, it sounds like to me.
I think, I think it's worthwhile to do the survey, but also just to have one night where you're available for an hour to hear a conversation.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, I like the idea of doing a survey because it does allow people who don't have time to come to meetings and focus groups to do that. And I think it doesn't hurt. I know that was part of your original plan to go to each school and have a focus night. People can come and they can ask you questions or give their opinions, and then you can collect the information that way. Is that?
And that way, in those conversations, you can hear everything, but you can also, focus the conversation to what the board has already kind of
Provide the people who attend with the documents that you've already given us. As a starting point. That makes sense to me.
And then I feel later on when we're getting to more detailed things, then you engage the community again at that point, with more specifics.
I completely agree. This is an open process. We're addressing problems that affect everybody in the district, and we're certainly not, Linda and I have talked about this. We're not the ones thinking that we have all the solutions to it. That's why everyone has been engaged, the different stakeholders so far, and, putting it out in the open right now. So, I advocate that, but I also, in the back of my mind, I hear other board members saying, hey, where are solutions? Let's get moving on this. Let's get going. So there's an energy behind it that we want to provide solutions to the community fast. We just want to do it thoughtfully. We want to make sure that everybody knows what we're moving ahead with.
That's why I actually don't think a focus group at each school is necessary. I think if you come to that night and you feel that then a focus group is necessary at each school, I would say you would have one community night about it. And then after the feedback or the attendance, and you feel that there needs to be focus groups at each school, then I would do that.
So does everyone agree with that proposal? We do a survey and one sort of general night and then focus groups.
My thought is do a survey, see what important things to the community come out of that, bring them into our list, and then present that entire thing in the open house.
I would sort of go along with what Carrie originally said, or what Linda also mentioned, was maybe let's just focus on what are the problems? What do they consider the 3 or 4 top problems with the district, so that we at least see if we're in line with what they're thinking. Maybe they think green roofs are great. Maybe that's what they want.
Maybe they're like, you guys are crazy. We should have a green roof on every building.
I do think we should give them the same document that we got. Everyone should get the same information in the survey, so they can see exactly what we see, and they can make their own decisions, I think. So I'm in favor of a survey, and then maybe an open, what do you call it, open house, where questions can be asked or proposals, and then we can go from there. Does that seem reasonable then? Everyone okay with that?
Yes.
And that's prior to compiling the document then?
Prior to
completion of
a final document. Does that make sense, everyone? It
What
does
are you
slow us down a
doing
little bit, I agree, but maybe it's
I think,
the price we pay.
Verbalize the timeline now.
I was just going to say, so I think, can we get the survey out tomorrow? No, soon.
Now we're probably talking 6 weeks before we can do a deeper dive on deliverables.
I would say at minimum.
Just so everybody knows.
This was part of our intention all along, was to do this, so I think we have to follow
community
through.
engagement was really, really important to us.
My concern is, like I said, I want community involvement. My concern is that we're going to be sitting here next year at the same time without a plan, because we're sort of
I disagree. I think we're on target.
We got the strategic plan done. We had a survey. We had focus groups, and we got that all done within a period of probably about 3 months. So I think if we're focused, we can do it. I think it's possible. So we just have to be focused and just get it done.
It has to be deliberate. I think we can do it. That strategic plan went very well. But that was a lot of people to mobilize.
So survey, like a facility night, a community-based facility night.
And hopefully get that done within the next month or so.
And that's back to the board, that's back to Facilities Advisory Committee. I mean, I feel like the board's weighed in on the priorities, right?
Right, I think it goes to the committee and then
back to committee.
Okay. So the plan, the idea is we want to do this in a sort of efficiently as possible. So that's, okay. Good. So is there any other comment on this topic? If not, then we move on to the...
Let's go through the list one more time.
the SARTA study. So Martha, do you want to say a few words about that?
Sure. This is a demographer that's worked with the district before. We had a study done in 2015. The recommendation is for us to consider as a new business discussion item, so this is not something to take action on tonight, but to consider it this month with the idea that we bring it back at next month's meeting. Feel that this is worthy, but this really relates to this facility conversation that we just had, but an idea that looking at a professional demographer to look at the trends in the community, it's kind of a repeat, it's a redo, but to see if the trends and analyses that were done 2 years ago are still holding true. You know, we hear a lot of these conversations about preschool programs feeling really full and programming for young children feeling really tightly enrolled, et cetera. So, you know, is there something more for us to gain from this? And certainly my recommendation, and I think this really came out of the conversation with the Facilities Advisory Group, that this is another kind of needed component of understanding where we are and helping us even understand kind of that range potentially of how much we go.
I consider this report sort of due diligence that a board, you know, an important step that the board takes. You know, I think it was, you know, Jeff, you asked that the last CASARTA study get circulated to everybody. I think that's valuable, just for this board to refresh that whole process in our minds. And you know, there's some schools of thought out there where people criticize demographer studies. You know, I still think it's an important step to take for a board, just to make sure that we understand what a professional in the industry thinks our district is going to take with respect to enrollment.
I agree. I mean, if we're talking about spending significant amounts of money on any of these projects, we should do our due diligence. At the same time, it's only been 3 years since he did his last study. His last prediction was that over the next 10 years, enrollment will be flat, up 2%, 2.5% in total. That was his baseline prediction. In fact, that's actually what's happened in the 3 years since he's made his prediction. We're more or less a little bit below where his projection will be more or less flat, which as we've been for some time in the elementary schools. His high projection was up 10%. His low projection was down 10%. So my strong suspicion is that that's exactly what we'll get back this time. But I do think it's worth just in case we're missing something.
Considering how much money we're looking to spend.
Exactly. But I'm not expecting miracles. He doesn't have some secret information source that we don't have. Right. Exactly. So
that's in the report. It's not a crystal ball.
Yes.
I'm just looking at
Takes the whole district out to 2020. Out of curiosity, though, I'm wondering why, and I understand for continuancy's sake why you'd want to go back to the same person the second time, but I'm wondering why we picked someone who is out of state. Or, you know, is there something special in regards to this?
I think David Sellers knew this guy, and I think he does a lot of work for school districts in the area. I think he's got a little cottage industry. This is, I'm a little bit disappointed to see his quote, actually, because he's already got almost all the information he needs from us. He only needs to stay for 3 years.
I'm going to say that that's a significant issue for me, that he doesn't seem to be discounting for the fact that he already has 80% of his data.
If there is someone else that's willing to, that is sort of equally competent in the area that would do it for a similar price, I would certainly be interested in that, because it gives a second opinion.
I'd be interested in the comparison, actually.
Yeah, perhaps
so if there is one out there, I don't know.
So it seems to be limited in terms of who does this. CASARTA is definitely someone that's working a lot in this general area. I did hear of 2 other names. But I had to do a lot of digging, because, like, is anybody using anybody other than CASARTA? Because that seems to be I think there's this question, is continuity better, or would you like to take a different kind of look with a different,
Oh, if there's a competent person, if there's a person that's equally qualified, I would strongly prefer a new opinion, because I kind of know Casarda's technique. We know he's looked at, so if that's possible, I wouldn't sort of spend 2 months on it either.
Right.
I agree with that approach. I'm fine with that because there could be the tendency. We're talking about professionals here, but there could be the tendency to do a dust off and
That's
change
absolutely,
the dates.
absolutely.
So
He doesn't have
fresh
to.
eyes. I always advocate fresh eyes.
You mentioned that, having just shared that study with us, and I definitely, and I read it, and I thought it was very interesting, although I couldn't quote you the times, but there were more than one time when I'm reading that report where I thought, that just someone who lived in this area wouldn't have said it that way, or would have had a different opinion.
He didn't understand some of the details, like he talked about, the life enrollment has bumped up and down over the last 20 years, and he didn't understand that's because the previous boards had moved tons of people to life, and moved them. So that's it's not because of demographics, it's just because of policy. So yeah, I agree. There's stuff he didn't get.
Can I summarize by saying, Martha, can you see if there's some other people out there who can do a study for a similar price?
Right. Or if not, then get a discount from Casarda.
I have two other names. I know the other one of the larger high schools in the area use them, so I don't know if it's sort of a per head. That was more of a 9,700, but I'd be happy to contact that organization, that group. And then I have one other piece of information that just came across my desk yesterday, so I'd be happy to do a comparison.
And can you see if
bring additional information.
Can you see if the gentleman who did it 10 years ago is also available? Coffron, Kofron, he's got his name on the map in the office, in the Hauser office.
Good.
All right.
All right, good. So we're in agreement on that. And then the next item, the last item, is a memorandum of understanding with the Village of Riverside. So I don't know, Martha, if you could say a few words about that.
Sure. So this is something that's kind of been in the works for a while. The ultimate goal would be to have a similar level of agreement also with North Riverside and with Brookfield. So this is an agreement to share information between the Village of Riverside and District 96. Primarily it's with the police department. Primarily it relates to student discipline issues, that kind of thing. So, but it's also just like family safety. I think they allude to some of that. It's that the police or fire or other village officials would come and share with us information that they feel if there's a threat to a child, if there's something kind of happening in the village that we would have what could be considered really more confidential level information, but that we do feel there's a value in having this shared agreement. The shared agreement has actually been reviewed by Shelley Anderson, our attorney, and also the village attorney. So it's kind of been through kind of a number of sort of paces in the review processes already. But I do want obviously the board, it's a board action item, so for us to take a look at it. I think it's fairly customary for school districts to have this kind of agreement and to be able to have this level of conversation with local officials around important issues that affect students.
This is not something we've had in the past?
It's unclear if it's outdated or that we didn't have it or that we have it, it's not finished. I think it's definitely something to sort of have taken this fresh look and bring it forward to this board and then to kind of know where we are and where we've been on this one.
I think it's a really important collaboration. My concern is the confidentiality of it.
Right.
We share information about students. And I know that there's a confidential portion of the agreement. I just, knowing that Shelley reviewed it, that gives me a comfort.
Right.
And we, so for example, Riverside Brookfield High School also has an agreement with the same villages. We actually very intentionally modified ours to look different than a high school agreement. We think that younger children, different level of sensitivity. We're not looking for there to be strong police presence or police action.
Right.
When our
need
students
parents
have a
communicated
fight,
to first.
it might be very different than a high school student having a fight. And so we really we asked Shelley to be very in tune with that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think this agreement's important. I do have some concerns with this agreement. I mean, specifically, like in the amendment. I'm sorry, and like in section B, B3, it says that information will be shared verbally. That just to me sort of, I mean, I understand I'm not sure why it's going to be shared only verbally, but it just seems like that sort of opens yourself up to hearsay. I mean, somebody can say, oh, well, I heard this from so-and-so. Also sort of in that section, there was something talking about, I have it here, talking about like policies, that there aren't really any policies in place. They say they will be talking about the policies, like in Section 300 confidentiality. Procedures for non-disclosure, I think, need to be developed prior to when we sign this agreement. I don't think we should just go in saying, oh, we're going to have procedures for non-disclosure. We need to have those in place. That's a concern for me because these are kids. I mean, and
Are we certain those don't exist?
So I think they do.
That's the
within
question.
Student Records
It would seem
Act
to me
and
that they would already
Foundational Rights
exist.
and
Seems very
Privacy, but I think
normal.
we start to touch in a little bit of a gray area here, somewhat intentionally through this agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And we know we've lived this a bit already with some of the student discipline matters.
Right.
So I'm just trying to think, I'm certainly willing to bring that concern forward for Shelley to want, like, I think there's some value in some of this getting shared verbally because some of this is not always clear fact. I'm concerned about this. Can you help me understand what's going on here? And I don't know that I want to create a written record when I'm really asking for a conversation.
well, it's more the police are reporting to the school verbally, not we reporting to the police. That's the verbal part.
Okay.
So that's what I'm concerned. I mean, I have concerns that the police are just going to be saying, could call us and say, oh, student X has this problem. I just think that needs to be more documented.
I actually disagree. I think creating a file attached to a student can be extremely damaging. Especially if there is some kind of confusion about the scenario, we have no idea. But that can lead, I think that's actually not beneficial in my opinion. But you know what I'm saying? Kind of automatically attaching paperwork to a child, I don't know.
I mean, and also I should also say, in like the section B4, it states that they're like the standards deemed by police. And I guess what are those standards? I don't know what those standards are. Is it the chief of police? Is it a detective? Is it an officer? I mean, what are those standards? I mean, I think, like I said, I'm sorry, I think this is important. I just think there's just a lot of, I almost think it's more one-sided. I don't think it's necessarily truly collaborative. But that's my interpretation of it. I just want to make sure that we protect the privacy of the kids and that these like standards, that we have these things identified beforehand, like these policies.
Does it make sense to maybe if you have some very specific concerns to write them up, send them to Martha, and she can pass them by the lawyer, and then we can see if there's anything you can pursue there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Great.
Okay. Any other comments on this for the moment? It's not a vote right now, so it's just questions. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we come to our second public comment. Is there any public comment? If not, then future meeting dates: September 6, 2017, committee of the whole, 7 p.m. This will be at Blythe Park. September 20th, the regular business meeting would be at 7 o'clock here in Hauser. October 4th, committee of the whole, 7 o'clock at Hauser. And October 18th, regular business, 7 o'clock at Hauser as well. So if there are no other items that people would like to discuss, the meeting is adjourned.